Tonight you are about to step into a forgotten world long before civilization where every night could be your last. You arrive beneath an enormous African sky almost 300,000 years before anyone will write a name, build a city or plant a field. The air carries dust, crushed grass, animal musk and the faint mineral smell of distant water. Somewhere beyond the low hills, large animals move through the dusk hidden by thorny vegetation and fading light. You hear insects beginning their evening chorus while unfamiliar birds settle noisily into trees. There are no roads here, no lamps beyond the horizon, and no village waiting behind you. Yet somewhere in this immense landscape, people exist who belong to the earliest populations we recognize as Homo Sapiens. They do not know they stand near the beginning of an extraordinary human story. They are simply trying to understand another evening. Before we step deeper into the darkness of tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more calming historical journeys. And while you settle in, tell us where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights and imagine placing one bare foot onto warm ground that has never felt the weight of a wheel. You could almost forget the enormous distance separating this place from your own lifetime. Then you begin noticing what is missing from this familiar-looking world. There is no engine humming beyond the hills, no aircraft crossing the sky, and no fence dividing one patch of land from another. Nothing around you has been organized for human convenience. Water follows its own ancient channels, trees grow wherever soil permits, and animal paths are the closest things resembling roads. Even the silence feels different. It is not truly silent, of course, because wind brushes seed heads together with a dry whisper. Frogs call from wetter ground, and somewhere farther away a hoof strikes hardened earth. You hear life everywhere, but almost none of it belongs to humans. Around 300,000 years ago, Africa already contains members of the human family with combinations of features scientists associate with early Homo sapiens. Fossils from sites such as Jebel Erhoud in present-day Morocco reveal people living surprisingly early in this period. Their faces show several recognizably modern characteristics, while their skull shapes remain more elongated than yours. If you met one of these people at a distance, the encounter might feel strangely familiar. You would recognize the upright posture, attentive eyes, capable hands, and a body shaped by long hours of walking. Yet closer inspection would reveal differences, reminders that human evolution never moved in a clean straight line. That untidy reality matters. For many years, people liked imagining human origins as a single dramatic beginning in one small place. The evidence now suggests something more complicated across Africa, with populations sometimes separated and sometimes connected over immense stretches of time. Human characteristics appear gradually in combinations, rather than arriving together like items from a neatly packed suitcase. Nature rarely respects T diagrams. The Africa around you is not one endless savanna. Forests, grasslands, wetlands, mountains, deserts, and coastal zones create an enormous patchwork. Their boundaries shift repeatedly over generations, sometimes slowly enough to escape notice during one lifetime. Your early human companions must learn this patchwork intimately. They need to remember where water remains after dry months, where suitable stone lies, and which routes become difficult after heavy rain. A landscape that appears wild and confusing to you may feel richly detailed to someone raised inside it. A bent tree can become a landmark, while a distant ridge may promise useful stone. The smell of damp soil may suggest water nearby, making memory as valuable as muscle. One curious detail is that some early Homo sapiens remains come from northwestern Africa, far from East African sites that once dominated popular origin stories. That does not mean humanity began neatly in Morocco. Instead, it suggests the story may involve many connected populations spread across a continent larger and more environmentally varied than simple maps imply. Researchers still disagree about exactly how these populations should be classified and connected. Fossils or incomplete dates carry uncertainties, and the word species itself becomes surprisingly awkward when applied to populations changing gradually across hundreds of thousands of years. You do not need to solve that debate tonight. Instead, you watch several figures moving through the landscape with practiced attention, carrying only what their bodies can manage. Their possessions are limited, yet the world around them contains remembered resources stored in particular places and seasons. Water waits in familiar hollows. Suitable stone lies in known outcrops, and useful plants return when rainfall and temperature allow. As darkness deepens, warmth stored in exposed earth begins fading and cooler air settles into lower ground. The scent of vegetation strengthens slightly mixed with smoke if a small fire burns nearby. Beyond that circle, Africa continues without concern for you. Large herbivores move toward water predators, begin their own routines, and night insects rise from damp ground. Stars slowly emerge above a horizon completely free of electric glow, making the sky almost unsettling in its clarity. You can see the Milky Way stretching overhead with a brightness many modern people rarely experience. Yet your companions may read the sky through seasonal patterns, familiar rhythms or meanings now permanently lost to archaeology. This is one of prehistory's quiet frustrations. Stones may survive bones, sometimes survive, but thoughts almost never do. You can reconstruct anatomy from fossils and estimate age from sediments, yet you cannot hear what someone whispered beside a fire. Perhaps there was humor, perhaps someone complained about being tired, or quietly watched another person working beside the flames. These ordinary possibilities make people separated from you by 300,000 years feel unexpectedly close. The world around them remains dangerous, but danger is not the only thing defining their lives. They also experience comfort, curiosity, routine, companionship, boredom, and moments when nothing particularly dramatic happens. Someone may examine an interesting stone, adjust a resting place, or notice clouds gathering beyond the hills. Human life already depends on small decisions. As you settle near the edge of that imagined evening, you understand the real strangeness of Earth 300,000 years ago. It is not an alien planet, but your planet before nearly everything familiar was built upon it. The mountains, rivers, and stars are real, and so are the people watching them. They stand at no ceremonial starting line, waiting for history to begin. They live inside an older human world filled with inherited skills, changing bodies, remembered landscapes and relationships you can only partly recover. Smoke drifts low across the ground, carrying the dry scent of wood into darkness. Somewhere beyond sight, an animal calls once, then disappears again into the enormous African night. You listen without moving. For now, civilization is impossibly far away, but humanity is already here. Section 2. The darkness around you does not belong to a stable world. Even while the people beside you sleep, Earth is moving through one of its long climatic rhythms. Ice grows across distant northern lands, then retreats only to gather again thousands of years later. These changes happen far beyond the horizon, yet their effects eventually reach almost every landscape your companions know. You feel none of this movement directly. There is no sudden crack in the sky announcing that a glacial age has arrived. Instead, temperatures shift across generations, rainfall patterns wander, and familiar lakes slowly shrink or expand. Grasslands advance into places that once held woodland, while dry country appears where marshes once attracted animals. To you, the changes would seem painfully slow. To people living through many generations, however, they could transform the entire geography of survival. Around 300,000 years ago, Earth lies within the Pleistocene, an epoch shaped by repeated glacial and interglacial cycles. Vast ice sheets repeatedly expand over the parts of the northern hemisphere, locking enormous quantities of water onto land. When ice grows, global sea level falls, exposing coastlines that disappear again during warmer phases. Your early human companions know none of those mechanisms. They do not imagine continental ice sheets thousands of kilometers away controlling distant shorelines. They simply notice that particular places become wetter, drier, colder, or warmer than the stories remembered by older people. Perhaps an elder points toward a valley and recalls water there during childhood. Now the ground is dusty, and only scattered pools remain beneath reeds. Memory becomes a kind of climate record. You walk at dawn across open ground, cooled by the night, and moisture clings faintly to low plants. The air smells of damp earth, crushed leaves, and animal tracks pressed into soft soil. A thin breeze passes across your arms, carrying a chill that vanishes quickly when sunlight reaches the plain. This Africa is not covered by glaciers. That is important to remember, because the phrase Ice Age often encourages images of endless snow and frozen mammoths. Much of Africa remains comparatively warm, but the great climatic cycles still influence rainfall, vegetation, lakes, rivers, and deserts. The effects can be subtle. A shift in ocean temperatures can alter atmospheric circulation, and changing rainfall can reshape entire ecosystems across long periods. What matters most to humans is not whether ice lies nearby. What matters is where water falls, how reliably it returns, and what grows afterward. Everything follows the rain. Animals move toward fresh vegetation, plants fruit during favorable seasons, and predators follow grazing herds. Humans in turn watch all of them. I begin to see why early life demands constant attention. There are no weather forecasts, stored reservoirs, or grain silos waiting through difficult seasons. When rainfall fails repeatedly, the consequences spread outward through plants, prey animals, water holes, and human movement. Yet climate change also creates opportunity. A region that was once too dry may become green enough to cross. New rivers can connect previously isolated populations, while expanding grasslands allow humans and animals to enter unfamiliar territory. Then the pattern reverses. Roots disappear behind desert wetlands, contracting groups that once exchanged people or materials may become separated for thousands of years. Researchers often describe these changes using terms such as glacial stages and interglacial phases. To you, those labels sound neat and organized. On the ground, however, the transitions would have felt irregular, local, and unpredictable. Climate does not change everywhere equally. One valley may remain productive while another dries. A highland region can stay cooler and wetter than nearby lowlands. Coastal environments may offer resources even when interior conditions become harsh. That unevenness creates refuge. Small human populations can survive in favorable pockets while surrounding areas become difficult to inhabit. Later, when conditions improve, those groups may spread outward again and reconnect with others. This may help explain something important about early Homo sapiens. Rather than one population advancing steadily across a fixed landscape, human evolution may involve a repeated separation and reunion among groups scattered across Africa. Climate could act almost like a shifting set of doors, opening pathways during some periods and closing them during others. The doors never stay still. One quirky consequence of lower sea levels is that the coastline itself can move dramatically outward. Places you would recognize today as underwater may once have been exposed land, offering beaches, tidal zones, and travel corridors now hidden beneath the sea. That creates an archaeological problem. Some evidence of ancient coastal life may simply be submerged, resting beyond the reach of ordinary excavation. Entire landscapes where people walked, gathered, shellfish, or camped could now lie beneath modern waves. The ocean keeps its secrets well. You stand beside an imaginary ancient shoreline and feel cool sand beneath your feet. Salt hangs in the air, seabirds cry overhead, and waves break against a coast positioned differently from the one you know today. Even here, nothing remains fixed. During colder global phases, falling sea levels expose broader coastal plains. During warmer phases, melting ice returns water to the oceans, gradually drowning those landscapes again. Scientists can reconstruct much of this pattern through marine sediments, ice records, fossils, and geological evidence. Yet uncertainty remains when they try to connect global climate stages with the exact environments experienced by particular human groups. Researchers still debate how strongly specific climatic shifts drove early human migration, isolation, and innovation. Climate clearly mattered, but humans were not passive objects simply pushed across maps by rainfall. They made choices. They remembered routes, shared information, experimented with tools, and responded socially to changing conditions. Two groups facing similar droughts might behave differently because their tradition, relationships, and local knowledge were not identical. That human flexibility matters deep. As afternoon fades, you look across a broad plain where distant clouds gather above dark hills. The smell of rain reaches you before the first drops arrive, earthy and cool against the dry air. People nearby notice immediately. Some turn toward the clouds while others continue their work without surprise. They have seen this pattern before, though perhaps not exactly like this. Rain begins softly. Drops strike dust, leaves, skin, and stone, creating a sense so familiar that the ancient world briefly feels very close. Small channels appear in hardened ground, insects emerge, and thirsty plants begin drinking almost at once. For a few moments, everything feels renewed. But one storm does not define a climate. The deeper pattern unfolds across centuries and millennia, far beyond any single human memory. Landscapes breathe slowly, expanding and contracting beneath cycles no person can fully see. I begin to understand that early Homo sapiens did not evolve against a motionless background. Their world repeatedly rearranged the rules of movement, food, water, and connection. The earth itself was part of the story, and somewhere beyond, the rain deserts were waiting for their turn to become green. Section 3. The rain you watched gathering in the distance does more than darken the soil. Given enough time, enough seasons, and enough shifting climate, it can transform an entire desert. The vast Sahara you know today does not always resemble an ocean of sand. During wetter phases, enormous portions of North Africa can become grassland, scrub, wetland, and lake country. I begin walking northward through one of those changing worlds. The ground beneath you is still dry in places, but green spreads across broad stretches of open country. Tough grasses bend under warm wind, while scattered trees rise along drainage channels and shallow depressions. In the distance, birds gather over the water that would seem impossible if you arrived expecting only dunes. The Sahara has another face. This transformation does not happen once, and it does not happen everywhere at the same moment. Over long spans of the Pleistocene, changes in Earth's orbit and atmosphere repeatedly alter the strength and position of African monsoon systems. Rain reaches farther north, where rainfall becomes more reliable. Vegetation follows then grazing animals, predators and people. A place that appears impassable during one era can become a broad ecological corridor during another. For early Homo sapiens, that difference is enormous. You approach a shallow lake beneath a pale morning sky and the air becomes cooler near the water. Mud presses softly under your feet, marked by hoof prints, bird tracks, and the deeper impressions of larger animals. Reeds whisper beside the shore. You smell wet vegetation, mud dung, and the faint sweetness of flowering plants growing beyond the shallows. Dragonflies flicker above the water, while distant animals move through haze rising under the sun. This does not feel like a desert. Yet many thousands of years later, a traveller might stand near the same region beneath a harsh, dry sky. The lake could be gone, the vegetation reduced, and wind might push sand across land once crossed by hippos and grazing herds. Earth can erase a landscape almost completely. Scientists know that the Sahara has repeatedly shifted between wetter and drier states. Sediments, fossil pollen, ancient lake beds, animal remains, and geological traces preserve evidence of these vanished environments. Even desert dust carries a history. You can imagine early humans moving through these greener periods without knowing they are crossing what future people will call the world's largest hot desert. To them, the land is simply a network of places remembered through water, shade, animals, and stone. Perhaps one route follows a chain of lakes, another runs beside seasonal rivers that swell after distant rains, a third passes through highlands where springs remain dependable after surrounding plains begin drying. Such routes matter because humans need more than open space. They need drinkable water, edible plants, animals, shelter, and the materials suitable for tools. A green corridor can connect populations that would otherwise remain separated by enormous dry distances. That connection may influence human evolution itself. People can meet, exchange mates, share techniques, imitate unfamiliar tool-making styles, and carry new ideas into distant regions. When dry conditions return, those networks may break apart again. The pattern resembles breathing. Land opens, populations spread, and contact becomes easier. Then dryness returns, habitats contract, and surviving groups retreat toward rivers, lakes, coasts, highlands, or other dependable refuges. Nothing about this is perfectly regular. Some wetter periods may last long enough for ecosystems to become deeply established. Others may arrive unevenly, leaving belts of green separated by harsh territory. You would not see a clean boundary. Instead, grasses might become thinner over several days of travel. Trees grow farther apart, water becomes less frequent, and animals gather more tightly around reliable sources. The warning signs are gradual. People who understand the landscape notice them long before you would. They may recognize which plants tolerate dry conditions or which birds tend to remain near permanent water. Knowledge becomes survival again. A small group moves ahead of you, carrying stone tools, wooden shafts, hides, and whatever food can be transported efficiently. They do not drag heavy possessions because movement itself remains one of their greatest advantages. A landscape can change faster than a camp. You follow their footprints beside the lake where soft ground preserves a brief record of passing bodies. Most such tracks will vanish within hours under windwater or trampling animals. Almost everything disappears. That is why the archaeological record feels so incomplete. A stone tool can survive astonishing stretches of time while baskets, wooden containers, plant fibers, skins, and ordinary footprints usually vanish. The material world of early humans was likely much richer than the few durable objects reaching archaeologists. The same problem affects ancient green Sahara landscapes. One unusual detail is that fossil animals found in now arid areas sometimes belong to species associated with much wetter environments. Remains of fish, crocodiles, and hippopotamuses reveal just how dramatically local conditions could differ from today. It is a strange thought. You might stand in modern desert country and imagine a hippopotamus resting nearby. The image sounds absurd until geology quietly supports it. Still, scholars disagree about exactly how continuous these wet corridors were during particular periods relevant to early Homo sapiens. Dating ancient environments is difficult, and local wet phases do not always align perfectly across a region as vast as North Africa. So the map remains fuzzy. You know greener conditions existed, but reconstructing the exact routes used by a particular human populations is harder. A route that looks inviting on a modern reconstruction may have been blocked by local drought at the wrong moment. Humans also may have traveled through harsher terrain than expected. They were adaptable after all. They could have crossed dry stretches between water sources, especially if they knew the landscape well. It would be a mistake to imagine them moving only where conditions were comfortable. Comfort is a modern luxury here. By midday, heat settles across the grassland and insects pulse in the air. Animals retreat towards shade while the lake surface shines almost white beneath the sun. You kneel near the water. It is warm at the edge and cooler beneath the surface, clouded slightly by disturbed sediment. Nearby, narrow tracks reveal where small mammals approach during the night. Everything comes here eventually. Water draws herbivores, predators, birds, insects, and people into overlapping spaces. That makes a lake valuable but never completely safe. You would learn to approach cautiously. A quiet shoreline can hide crocodiles. Dense reeds can conceal large animals. Even harmless-looking water may carry parasites or other risks no one can see. Still, without it, there is nothing. As afternoon passes, clouds form over distant high ground, darkening the horizon. You hear a low rumble, then feel a cooler gust touch your face. The air changes first. Birds become restless, and the scent of damp earth arrives before the rain reaches you. Large drops begin striking the lake, creating thousands of brief circles across its surface. For a while the world softens, dust settles, leaves shine, small channels begin carrying water downhill, and the ground releases that deep mineral smell after rain. You watch the people around you respond without ceremony. They adjust coverings, move useful objects, and continue with the quiet efficiency of people who understand weather as part of ordinary life. No one treats the storm as a spectacle. It is simply another condition. That attitude may be one of the most important differences between you and them. You often experience landscapes as backgrounds, but they live inside systems demanding constant observation. Rainfall changes food. Water changes routes. Vegetation changes animals. And those changes shape human choices. As evening approaches, sunlight returns beneath the retreating clouds, turning wet grass golden. Far beyond you, the green corridor continues toward regions that future ages will know as relentless desert. For now, however, it is alive. You stand beside water beneath a sky brightened by the recent rain and realize how misleading the modern map can be. The Sahara of today is only one version of this place. 300,000 years ago, Earth kept redrawing it, and the humans moving through these changing lands learned to redraw their lives with it. Section 4. The figures beside the rain-darkened lake are no longer distant shapes. As you move closer, their humanity becomes impossible to miss. One person crouches beside a stone, turning it carefully in both hands before striking its edge. Another watches the surrounding grass while carrying something wrapped in hide. A third stands near the water, shoulders relaxed, but eyes alert. You recognize them immediately. They walk upright, gesture with familiar hands, and turn their heads toward unexpected sounds. Their movements carry the same mixture of caution, curiosity, and routine you might notice among people anywhere. Yet their faces are not quite yours. Around 300,000 years ago, some African human populations possessed combinations of anatomical features associated with the earliest Homo sapiens. Their faces can look surprisingly modern, while other parts of the skull retain shapes different from most people living today. You are meeting humanity during a transition. The person nearest you has a strong body shape by constant movement through uneven country. There is no chair supporting the back, no vehicle carrying the legs, and no supermarket removing the need to travel for resources. Walking is simply life. You notice powerful hands, capable shoulders, and feet accustomed to rough surfaces. Daily existence includes lifting, carrying, climbing, squatting, digging, throwing, and covering distances that would exhaust many modern people. Still, avoid imagining a gigantic brute. Early Homo sapiens were humans, not fantasy cavemen built like stone walls. Bodies varied among individuals just as human bodies vary now, and strength was only one part of surviving this environment. Observation mattered just as much. A person who remembered water locations could be more valuable than someone physically stronger. Someone skilled at shaping stone might save hours of effort for everyone around them. Another individual could recognize plants, animal behavior, weather patterns, or routes through unfamiliar territory. Human usefulness already came in many forms. As you study the group, the first striking difference lies above the eyebrows and behind the forehead. Some early Homo sapiens fossils show more robust brow regions than are common today, although their faces are less projecting than those of some earlier human forms. Their brain cases can also be elongated. Modern human skulls tend to have a more rounded, globular shape. That characteristic appears to have developed gradually, meaning an early person could possess a fairly modern-looking face beneath a skull whose overall proportions remained more ancient. Evolution loves mixtures. It rarely replaces an entire body design overnight. You might expect early Homo sapiens to stand at some obvious halfway point between ape and modern human. The reality is far less convenient because different traits changed at different times and populations did not all look identical. There was no uniform model. Imagine several communities scattered across enormous regions of Africa. Their members occasionally separate, expand, reconnect, and exchange genes over spans far longer than recorded history. Each population changes slightly. Some features spread widely while others remain local or disappear. Over thousands of generations, the human form becomes a shifting mosaic rather than a sequence of perfectly separated boxes. Scientists encounter that mosaic in fragments. A jaw appears in one region. A skull comes from another. Teeth survive somewhere else while stone tools lie nearby without any human bones at all. The evidence is tantalizingly incomplete. One famous glimpse comes from Jebel Irhoud in what is now Morocco, where fossils dating to roughly 300,000 years ago display a fascinating combination. Their faces fall broadly within the range expected for early Homo sapiens, while their brain cases remain noticeably elongated. That combination changed how many people pictured our origins. You are not looking at a sudden appearance of fully modern anatomy in one isolated corner of Africa. Instead, the emerging picture suggests long evolutionary processes involving populations distributed across different regions. The continent itself becomes part of the laboratory. Its mountains, deserts, lakes, forests, and grasslands alternately connect and separate people. The climatic doors you encountered earlier keep opening and closing, allowing populations to meet after long periods apart. Each reunion can matter. New relationships form, genes move between groups, and techniques may spread along with people. A useful way of striking stone can travel farther than the person who first discovered it. Perhaps gestures travel too. Perhaps stories do. Those things leave almost no direct trace. You watch one adult glance towards another and make a brief movement with the hand. The second person responds immediately, altering direction without any visible hesitation. You cannot know what was communicated. That uncertainty is enormous. Scientists continue debating exactly which fossils should be classified as Homo sapiens, and where meaningful boundaries should be drawn between early members of our species and closely related populations. Evolution happens gradually, but scientific names demand categories. Nature did not provide labels. There was never a morning when a mother belonging to one species suddenly gave birth to a child belonging neatly to another. Each generation resembled the previous one, while differences accumulated across immense stretches of time. That simple fact makes the human family tree wonderfully inconvenient. Your imaginary meeting also challenges another habit, assuming ancient-looking anatomy implies an ancient-looking mind. A skull tells you about bone. It does not directly tell you how funny someone was, how deeply someone grieved, or whether someone spent quiet evenings remembering a parent who had died years before. Intelligence and that emotional life do not fossilize cleanly. You must resist easy conclusions. One quirky clue comes from teeth. Human teeth are remarkably useful to researchers because they preserve well and record aspects of development. Tiny growth patterns within tooth enamel can provide information about childhood biology, sometimes preserving details that vanished from every softer tissue. A tooth can become a biography to the person carrying it, however, it was simply a tooth. Perhaps it aches occasionally. That mundane possibility pulls you closer to this strange world. The individual before you does not wake each morning feeling prehistoric. There is no prehistoric feeling. There is hunger, cool air, sore muscles, irritation, affection, curiosity, and relief when water is found. There is probably impatience when another person takes too long with a task. Humanity includes inconvenience. You notice scars across skin, though you cannot know their stories. Thorns, falls, tools, animals, and daily work offer countless chances for injury without requiring dramatic encounters. Hands reveal especially much. Fingers are stained by earth and plant material. Fine dust settles into creases while repeated tasks roughen skin along particular surfaces. These hands are precision instruments. They can grip stone firmly enough to strike it, then adjust pressure delicately enough to remove a controlled flake. That combination of force and finesse reflects a much older human inheritance. The same hand might later touch another person's shoulder gently. As the day cools, the group begins moving away from the water. Their silhouettes lengthen across wet ground, and low sunlight catches the edges of their bodies. You follow at a respectful distance. One individual walks with a slightly uneven step, perhaps from an old injury. Others do not abandon that person, at least in the scene you imagine. Care has deep roots among humans. Evidence from much older hominin populations shows that some individuals survived injuries or physical limitations long enough to suggest social support. Exactly how care worked among early Homo sapiens remains harder to reconstruct, but cooperation is unlikely to have been optional. Children require years of attention. Knowledge must be learned. Food varies unpredictably, predators exist, injuries happen, and no single person can master every problem alone. You begin seeing these humans differently. They are not crude prototypes waiting to become you. They are successful people living competently within their own world, carrying evolutionary histories as complex as the environment around them. Their bodies are ancient. Their presence feels familiar. As darkness gathers beneath scattered trees, one person looks back toward the lake. For a brief moment, you imagine your eyes meeting across 300,000 years. The distance is enormous, and yet somehow surprisingly small. Section 5. The group leaves the lake without leaving much behind. There is no doorway to close, no fence to pass through, and no permanent roof waiting ahead. What you would call home is not one fixed building, because home moves with people, seasons, water, and memory. I begin walking with them. The ground feels firm away from the shore, warm beneath your feet after the afternoon sun. Dry stems brush against your legs and tiny seeds cling stubbornly to skin and hide. Somewhere behind you, frogs continue calling from the shallows while the smell of wet mud slowly fades. Ahead lies open country. No village reases in the distance. No smoke column marks a settlement occupied for generations. There are no planted fields, storage barns, livestock pens, or walls protecting accumulated property. Agriculture does not exist. Neither does the idea of staying in one place because crops must be watered or harvested. These early Homo sapiens live within mobile foraging worlds where people obtain food from wild landscapes and move when local conditions demand it. That does not mean they wander randomly. The difference matters. To you, a journey without roads may look uncertain, but the people around you likely understand their territory through remembered routes. They know where stone can be collected, where certain fruits ripen, and which depressions hold water longer after rain. Movement follows knowledge. A distant ridge may mark an important boundary. A stand of trees might signal edible plants, shade, or insects worth collecting at certain times. Animal tracks can suggest nearby water long before you see it. This landscape is full of information. You simply cannot read most of it. One person pauses near a patch of disturbed soil and studies several impressions carefully. Another bends toward a plant touching leaves before moving on. No one consults a map. The map exists in memory. This reliance on remembered geography may have shaped social life deeply. Knowledge belongs not only to individuals, but also to groups that teach, share, correct, and preserve useful experience. An elder remembers an unusual drought. Another person recalls where animals gathered afterward. Someone younger notices a new source of stone, and that discovery gradually becomes part of collective knowledge. Information can outlive the person who first learned it. That is one of humanity's quiet strengths. As evening approaches, the group reaches a sheltered area near scattered trees and a low rocky rise. It is not a house yet, it offers protection from wind and provides a useful view across nearby ground. People begin settling. Perhaps they arrange branches or vegetation for comfort. Hides may be placed against damp soil while useful objects are gathered close enough to find after darkness. Most of this material will never fossilize. Wood decays. Plant fibers vanish. Hides disappear. Archaeologists are therefore left with an unfair picture of prehistoric possessions because stone survives far more easily than nearly everything else. An ancient campsite can look strangely empty after hundreds of thousands of years. It was probably not empty at all. There may have been wooden digging sticks, containers made from organic materials, simple carrying devices, bedding bindings, and other objects now lost completely. This creates a curious illusion. Because stone tools dominate the archaeological record, you might imagine ancient people constantly surrounded by stone. In reality, stone may have been only one portion of a much broader technology. Wood could have mattered enormously, so could plant fiber. Even a simple cord can transform what hands are able to carry, tie, suspend, or repair. Exactly when particular technologies appeared remains uncertain because soft materials rarely survive from such deep time. Researchers still debate how complex the organic toolkits of early Homo sapiens were around 300,000 years ago. Silence fills those missing spaces. You watch one adult carrying a child who has become tired. That burden alone changes the movement. Young children cannot travel long distances efficiently, and human infants require prolonged care. A mobile society therefore has to balance resource needs against the physical demands of children, injured people, and older members. Mobility requires planning. A group cannot simply march endlessly toward the horizon. Distances matter. Water matters. The pace of the slowest person matters. I begin to understand why small foraging groups likely move through landscapes in flexible ways. They may remain near productive resources for a time, then relocate when food becomes scarce or conditions change. Some movements may be short, others may connect widely separated areas. The term nomadic can sound as though people belong nowhere. In reality, mobile communities can be deeply attached to familiar territories even without building permanent structures. Places can hold meaning without walls. A spring visited repeatedly becomes known across generations. A rock shelter can become associated with safety goods, stone, unpleasant insects, or memories of people long gone. Human geography is emotional as well as practical. By now the temperature has dropped. The air feels cooler against your skin, and a faint breeze carries the smell of dry grass mixed with smoke. Someone has begun working near a small fire, though the flames are modest and controlled. Nearby food is shared. There are no ceramic bowls, no metal knives, no wooden table stands in the center. Yet the scene does not feel empty. People sit close together, passing objects from hand to hand, adjusting their positions and watching one another with ordinary familiarity. You notice something important. Possessions are limited because everything must eventually be carried. That creates a world very different from your own. Accumulating hundreds of objects makes little sense when your body is the transport system. Useful things must justify their weight. A stone core has value. A sharp flake has value. A hide that provides warmth may be worth carrying despite its bulk. Other items can be replaced from the landscape. This constant calculation probably shapes daily decisions in ways you rarely experience. Every object has a cost measured not only in effort to make it, but also in energy required to move it. Travelite or some suffer. There is gentle irony in realizing that people living without closets may have understood minimalist living far better than anyone selling books about it today. They would not call it minimalism. They would call it Tuesday. As darkness thickens, you consider what is also absent from this camp. There are no domesticated sheep nearby, no goats, no cattle managed as property. Dogs will become human companions much later, and even that history remains complicated. For now, animals are one neighbors. Plants are wild too. Humans do not sow grain and wait for harvest. They depend on naturally occurring resources whose locations and seasons must be remembered carefully. That dependence can be demanding. Wild foods appear irregularly. Some are abundant for only a few weeks, others require processing, digging, cracking, or patient searching. The landscape offers plenty but never at your command. Scholars still debate exactly how large these early groups were and how often individuals move between communities. Archaeology can reveal occupation areas and tool distributions, yet social boundaries remain extremely difficult to reconstruct. You cannot count conversations from stone flakes. Still, human populations almost certainly required connections beyond a single tiny group. Partnerships, exchange mating networks, and visits between communities would help maintain genetic and social ties. Isolation could be dangerous over long periods. Connection becomes another resource. Night arrives fully now. Bodies settle close to the warmth while someone adjusts vegetation beneath a sleeping place. You hear faint breathing insects and an occasional crack from burning wood. There is no permanent house here, yet there is shelter. There is no village, yet there is community. There is no field under cultivation, yet people know where food will return when the season changes. You look into the darkness surrounding this temporary camp and realize that settled life is not the default condition of humanity. For most of our existence, people lived without streets, farms, property lines, or permanent buildings. Movement was normal. The world itself was home. And tomorrow, when light reaches the grass again, these people may rise and continue onward, carrying almost everything they own in their hands and everything else inside their memories. Section 6. Morning arrives slowly across the open country, revealing shapes that darkness had hidden. At first, you notice only movement beyond the camp. Dust rises in soft columns above the grass, glowing pale gold beneath the early sun. Then one enormous body emerges from the haze, followed by another and another. The landscape suddenly feels crowded. These are not animals, confined to distant reserves or separated from humans by roads and fences. They move freely through the same valleys, watering places, woodland edges and grasslands used by early Homo sapiens. Some are familiar, others are not. Africa around 300,000 years ago supports a remarkable variety of large mammals, including elephants, hippos, rhinoceroses, buffalo, antelope, horses, and powerful predators. Some species resemble animals still living today, while others belong to lineages that will eventually disappear. You stand near a low rise and watch a herd crossing below. Their footsteps produce a dull rhythm through the ground. Dry grass bends against thick legs, insects scatter, and the warm air carries the heavy smell of hide dung dust and trampled vegetation. Size changes everything. An elephant is impressive even when you expect to see one. Here, without barriers or vehicles, its scale becomes more immediate. You are simply another animal standing nearby. The people accompanying you understand that distinction instinctively. They do not approach carelessly, and they do not assume that curiosity gives them control. Large herbivores can be dangerous. A frightened animal weighing several tons does not need to be a predator to become a serious threat. Even smaller hoofed animals can injure someone who misjudges distance, movement, or mood. So people watch. That habit of watching may be one of the most important skills in this world. Earth's direction can reveal water. Fresh tracks can indicate how recently animals passed. Bird activity can suggest disturbance nearby, while sudden silence may warn that something larger is moving through vegetation. Animals become part of the landscape's language. I begin learning a few words. Across the plain, several large bovids graze near taller grass. Some resemble modern buffalo, but fossil Africa also contains impressive forms no longer seen today. One famous example is the giant buffalo pelorovis. Depending on the species and period, these animals could carry enormous horns extending dramatically from the skull. Seeing such a creature at close range would make modern cattle appear almost politely designed. There is no reason to challenge one. Your companions seem to agree. They alter their path, quietly giving the animals generous space. This is not cowardice, it is competence. A person injured badly enough may be unable to walk with the group, gather food, carry water, or escape danger. Avoiding unnecessary risks is therefore just as important as possessing courage. The prehistoric world rewards judgment. Farther away, water glitters beneath the morning sky. As you approach, the smell changes from dry grass to mud and wet plants. Then something moves. A broad head rises from the shallows before disappearing again beneath the surface. Hippos. They look almost peaceful when partly submerged, but appearance is deceptive. Their bodies are enormously powerful, and they can move quickly when threatened. The water's edge demands respect. You notice that early humans do not simply rush toward the nearest pool. They scan banks, reeds, tracks, and nearby vegetation first. Drinking is a small tactical exercise. Everyone needs water. So does everything capable of causing trouble. This overlap makes watering places some of the richest and most dangerous locations in the landscape. Herbivores gather there. Predators follow them. Humans arrive for exactly the same reason. For a while, several species may occupy the area without conflict, each maintaining distance and attention. The scene feels surprisingly organized. Not peaceful exactly. More like negotiation without language. Each animal watches space. A herd shifts slightly when another approaches. Birds hop near large mammals, insects hover over mud, and crocodiles remain almost invisible near the shore. You begin appreciating how much prehistoric survival depends upon recognizing boundaries that cannot be seen. There are no signs, no warnings. No ranger explains which animal needs 50 meters of distance. Experience must supply the rules. Some of that experience probably comes painfully, but much can also be taught. A child who watches adults respond cautiously to elephant tracks does not need to rediscover every danger alone. Social learning allows knowledge to travel between generations. That may be one reason human children remain dependent for so long. They are not merely growing bodies, they are learning worlds. The animals themselves also change through time. Species expand into new regions when climates become favorable, then retreat when rainfall or vegetation shifts. Some populations adapt to new conditions while others eventually vanish. The Pleistocene is full of such movement. Africa is dynamic, not frozen in one ecological arrangement. A grassland you cross today may become woodland in a distant future. A lake filled with hippos may dry completely. An animal common during one climatic phase may become rare in another. This changing abundance influences human choices. If large grazing animals move elsewhere, people must decide whether to follow, exploit different foods, or relocate toward more dependable resources. You are beginning to see that humans do not dominate this ecosystem. They participate in it. That distinction matters. Popular images sometimes place prehistoric people at the center of every scene, as though the whole ancient landscape exists mainly as a hunting ground. In reality, most animal lives unfold with little concern for human plans. Elephants migrate. Antelope breed. Predators defend eaters defend territories. Birds follow seasonal patterns. Humans are only one clever species among many. A particularly odd detail appears when you consider how different animal communities could be from those you know. Fossil records reveal combinations of species living together that would feel unusual today because later extinctions and range changes reshaped ecosystems. Modern nature is not the original arrangement. It is simply the version surviving now. Researchers continue debating exactly how much early Homo sapiens influenced large animal populations during this period. Human hunting certainly mattered in some contexts, but climate, habitat change, reproduction rates, and interactions among species also shaped animal abundance. Simple explanations rarely survive deep time. You stop beneath scattered shade as the heat intensifies. The bark against your palm feels rough and warm. Flies circle lazily around exposed skin while cicadas build a steady pulse from nearby vegetation. Across the plain, something enormous moves again. An elephant tears branches from a tree, producing sharp cracks that travel through otherwise gentle afternoon sound. Leaves shake, dust falls, and smaller animals quietly shift away. Nothing challenges it. You can understand why. An adult elephant represents moving strength on a scale no human body can match. Yet people do not need to match it physically. They have other advantages. They can cooperate. They can anticipate. They can remember. They can shape tools and communicate about danger. Most importantly, they can choose not to stand where several tons of irritated herbivore are about to arrive. Sometimes intelligence looks wonderfully unheroic. As afternoon fades, you follow a game trail marked by countless feet. The soil is packed smooth in places and crushed vegetation releases a sharp green smell beneath your steps. Tracks overlap so densely that identifying individual animals becomes difficult. This trail existed without human construction. Animals created it through repetition. Early humans can use such pathways too, benefiting from generations of movement by creatures that know where water and easier ground lie. The wilderness already has roads. They simply have hooves instead of paving stones. Near sunset silhouettes gather against the orange horizon. Long-horned animals graze beneath fading light while birds cross overhead toward distant roosts. The scale of life feels almost excessive. You are surrounded by the bodies larger, faster, heavier, and better armed than your own, and yet the people beside you persist. They do not need to become the strongest animal in Africa. They need to understand the stronger animals. That difference will matter repeatedly in the long human story. For now you stand quietly while another herd passes through dusty evening light. The ground trembles faintly beneath your feet and the smell of warm earth rises around you. This planet belongs to giants. Humans are here too. But no one has told the giants that humans will someday imagine themselves in charge. Section 7. The giants disappear into the evening, but the landscape does not become safer when they leave. Instead, another shift begins. Light drains from the grasslands, shadows merge beneath trees, and the warm ground slowly releases the heat it gathered all afternoon. The air smells different now, carrying dust-dry leaves, animal musk, and the faint dampness rising from lower ground. You hear the first hyena call. It comes from far away, rolling strangely across the darkness, with a sound almost resembling laughter. Another answers from somewhere beyond the ridge, and the people beside you become noticeably more attentive. Night belongs to different hunters. Lions, leopards, hyenas, crocodiles, and other predators occupy many of the same environments as early Homo sapiens. Their exact ranges change with climate and habitat, but humans cannot assume darkness belongs to them alone. For you, night means reduced visibility. For some predators, it means opportunity. The difference feels uncomfortable. You sit near a small fire while your eyes struggle to understand the black space beyond its glow. Every bush seems deeper than it appeared during daylight, and every rustle becomes slightly more interesting than you would prefer. A branch moves, nothing follows. Then grass shifts farther away. Again nothing appears. Your imagination becomes very productive after sunset. The people around you probably know this feeling, although experience gives them tools that you lack. They understand familiar sounds and notice when something sounds wrong. A grazing animal snorting nearby means one thing. Several animals suddenly running means another. Birds exploding from the tree can announce disturbance before a human sees the cause. Listening becomes a form of vision. That ability matters because humans are not especially impressive nighttime creatures. Your eyesight works well in daylight, but many predators possess senses better suited to darkness. A lion can approach through grass with unnerving silence. A leopard can use vegetation, rocks, and trees for concealment. Hyenas possess powerful jaws, strong social behavior, and an excellent ability to locate food across long distances. None of them view humans through one simple category. Sometimes humans are competitors. Sometimes predators avoid them. Sometimes circumstances make a vulnerable person potential prey. The relationship is complicated. Archaeological evidence from deep prehistory occasionally preserves signs that large carnivores and humans used the same caves or landscapes, though often at different times. Bones marked by teeth and tools reveal overlapping worlds where access to carcasses could become contested. Who arrived first was important. Imagine finding a dead herbivore beneath the morning sun. Meat remains on the body but tracks surround it. Perhaps lions made the kill and moved temporarily into shade. Do you approach? The answer is not automatically yes. Meat can be valuable, but becoming meat yourself is a poor nutritional strategy. Your companions need judgment again. They watch vultures, study tracks, smell the air, and listen for nearby movement. Even scavenging requires knowledge of predator behavior. Humans may also compete with carnivores over valuable carcasses. Exactly how frequently early? Homo sapiens hunted large animals themselves, scavenged from other predators, or combined both strategies varies by place and period. Researchers still argue over the balance because bones preserve only fragments of complex behavior. Predators leave ambiguous clues. A tooth mark may overlap a stone cut. A bone may have been moved. A carcass could have been visited by several species at different times. The ancient dinner table was crowded. Back at campfire changes the situation but does not create an invisible wall of safety. Flames can discourage some animals and give humans light, yet predators are not mechanical creatures programmed to flee whenever smoke appears. Wind direction matters. Fire size matters. Experience matters. So does whether the animal is hungry, curious, threatened, or accustomed to human presence. The people beside you keep fuel nearby. Someone occasionally adds a branch, sending sparks upward into the black sky. Smoke drifts across your face, stinging your eyes and leaving a bitter taste on your tongue. You are grateful for it anyway. Beyond the glow, the night remains immense. A low roar arrives from somewhere far across the plain. Conversation stops. The sound is deeper than you expected, almost physical, passing through the air and settling in your chest. You cannot see the animal producing it. That makes it worse. A lion's roar can carry across considerable distances under favorable conditions. For early humans, such calls are not documentary soundtrack effects. They are information. Distance must be estimated. Direction matters. Repeated calls may suggest more than one animal. The people around you listen calmly, which somehow makes you more nervous. You begin noticing how living beside predators may have influenced human social habits. Sleeping together offers more eyes, more ears, and more potential defenders than sleeping alone. Shared vigilance has obvious value. One person wakes while another rests. Someone hears movement. Another tends fire. Children remain near adults. The arrangement need not be formally planned to become useful through tradition. Cooperation makes darkness smaller. That does not mean ancient nights were filled with constant terror. If every rustle produced panic, nobody would sleep enough to function. People who grow up among dangerous animals learn which signals deserve attention and which can be ignored. Familiarity does not remove risk, but it changes fear into practical caution. A hyena calling far away may be ordinary. A hyena suddenly calling very close is different. You would prefer a detailed instruction manual. There isn't one. A particularly curious aspect of this relationship is that humans and large carnivores sometimes selected similar places for shelter. Caves and rock overhangs attract both because they offer shade protection and convenient resting spaces. Unfortunately, excellent real estate rarely has only one interested species. A cave may contain bones or droppings revealing recent carnivore activity. The smell alone can serve as warning. Sharp musky odors linger in enclosed spaces, while scratched ground or accumulated remains may suggest that another occupant considers the shelter already taken. Ancient humans needed to notice such detail. Moving into the wrong cave could become a remarkably poor housing decision. You can almost appreciate the gentle absurdity. There are no landlords yet, but territorial disputes already exist. Leopards deserve particular respect. They are powerful climbers and skilled ambush hunters capable of using trees and broken terrain in ways humans cannot easily predict. A quiet, rocky slope at dusk may therefore deserve more attention than an open plain. Crocodiles create another problem. They turn water. The resource. Every human must approach into a place where danger can remain nearly invisible. Muddy banks may look peaceful while powerful animals wait just below the surface. You remember the careful drinking behavior from earlier. Now it makes even more sense. Still, predators are not only threats, they can provide information. Vultures circling may reveal carcasses. Carnivore tracks show where prey animals travel. A distant disturbance can indicate where large herds have gathered. Humans living inside this ecosystem learn from their competitors even while avoiding them. Predators shape human attention. Perhaps they also shape stories. You cannot know whether people around this fire already tell tales about lions, hyenas, or creatures hidden beyond the light. Spoken traditions leave no fossils, yet dangerous animals are difficult to ignore. A child who nearly encounters one will remember. An adult who survives an attack may become a source of cautionary knowledge. Warnings can travel farther than scars. Scholars cannot reconstruct the emotional world surrounding predators with confidence. They can study fossil-damaged carnivore remains, cave occupation and environmental context, but fear, respect, symbolism and storytelling rarely leave direct evidence. The uncertainty remains. You look toward the edge of the firelight. Two pale reflections appear briefly between grasses. Your body tightens. Then the eyes move sideways, revealing a smaller animal passing at a distance. The people beside you barely react. You exhale quietly. They probably would have found that amusing. Later the fire settles into glowing embers. Night insects form a steady background hum, broken occasionally by distant calls and shifting bodies nearby. Someone turns in sleep. Another person remains awake. You realize that survival does not require defeating every predator in the landscape. Humans simply need to reduce risk often enough, learn quickly enough, and remain connected strongly enough to endure. The darkness of stay is dangerous, but it is also familiar. These people have grown beneath the same stars, heard the same nighttime hunters, and learned where safety becomes more likely. You listen to one final roar far beyond the camp. No one moves. The fire glows softly and human breathing continues in the dark. Section 8. The final roar fades into the distance, but the fire beside you remains. Its light is small compared with the darkness, yet it changes everything within reach. Faces become visible again, hands can keep working, and shadows retreat several steps beyond the glowing wood. You feel the heat first. It touches your palms and cheeks while cooler night air settles across your back. Smoke curls upward with the dry scent of burning branches, then shifts suddenly when the wind changes direction. Someone moves away from it. You do the same. Even 300,000 years ago, smoke still seems determined to find whoever dislikes it most. Around you, the group settles closer to the flames. Fire is not a new discovery for humanity at this moment. Evidence from earlier archaeological sites suggests that hominins interacted with controlled fire long before the first Homo sapiens appeared. Exactly how regularly they maintained it remains less certain. Natural fires caused by the lightning would already have been familiar across many African landscapes. Burned ground attracts animals, reveals underground foods, and changes vegetation after rain returns. At some point, humans learned to keep fear. That achievement sounds simple until you imagine life without matches. A flame must survive wind, damp, weather movement, and long periods when suitable fuel becomes difficult to find. Losing it may mean waiting for another natural ignition unless people can create fire reliably. Whether early Homo sapiens around this period could consistently start fires themselves remains debated. Archaeologists find burned materials, ash-heated stone, and altered bones, but those traces can be difficult to interpret. A wildfire can produce some of the same signs as a human-managed flame. Context becomes everything. Tonight, however, you sit beside a fire that is clearly being tended. One person adjusts a branch rather than simply throwing wood into the center. Another moves a glowing piece closer to smaller fuel, encouraging a weak flame to return. There is skill in the gesture. Good fire needs air. Too much fuel can smother it, while too little allows the heat to disappear. Damp wood produces thick smoke and frustration. These problems are ancient. You watch sparks rise and vanish among the stars. The flames provide obvious warmth, especially during cool nights or at higher elevations, but their importance extends far beyond comfort. Fire changes food. Some plants become softer after heating. Tough roots can become easier to chew, while meat may become more digestible and safer from certain pathogens. Cooking can also unlock more usable energy. That matters for a hungry species with expensive brains and active bodies. Still, you should not picture every meal neatly roasted over a cheerful campfire. Archaeological evidence for regular cooking becomes clearer in later periods, and the frequency of cooking this early remains uncertain. The fire may serve many purposes at once. Its smoke discourages some insects. Its light allows social activity after sunset. Its heat can alter wood, perhaps helping harden the tips of certain tools when carefully controlled. And then there is protection. You remember the predators beyond the darkness. Flames can make a human camp more visible, but they can also make approaching dangerous animals more cautious. Smoke movement, voices, and light together create an unusual zone within the nighttime landscape. The group has created its own small environment. That may be one of fire's deepest effects. Without it, darkness would sharply limit activity. With it, part of the day continues beyond sunset. You can talk. You can repair tools. You can examine an injury. You can prepare food or simply remain awake together while the colder hours pass. Night becomes social time. That possibility fascinates researchers because fire may have influenced human relationships as much as human technology. A controlled hearth gathers people physically close, creating repeated opportunities for communication and shared attention. You notice it now. Bodies arrange themselves around one center. Faces point inward. Someone works with a stone flake while another watches. A child leans against an adult half awake, following the movement of sparks above the flames. No one needs to schedule this gathering. The fire organizes space automatically. There is a center and an edge. There is warmth and cold. There is light and uncertainty. I begin to understand how such a simple feature could shape human evenings for hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps information was exchanged here. Perhaps disputes were settled here. Perhaps somebody demonstrated how to shape stone while others observed. None of those conversations survive. Archaeology can reveal hearths more easily than memories. Researchers still disagree about when fire became a truly habitual part of daily human life. Some sites suggest repeated controlled use surprisingly early, while others leave a much weaker or more ambiguous record. Preservation creates another problem. Ash can disappear. Wind scatters charcoal. Rain moves sediments. Later occupations disturb earlier ones. A fire that mattered enormously for one evening may leave almost nothing behind. That is strangely humbling. You are watching one of the most important human technologies yet. Its archaeological signature can be lighter than footprints after rain. There is also a quirky practical problem. If your group depends on carrying live embers, somebody must transport them safely between camps. Smoldering material can remain hot inside bark, fungus, wood, or other insulating substances. The exact techniques used this far back are unknown. Still, people in many later traditional societies found ingenious ways to transport fire without rebuilding it from nothing each evening. You can imagine the value immediately. A glowing ember weighs little, yet it carries warmth, protection, cooking potential, and hours of saved effort. Few objects could be more useful. You picture someone checking such an ember during travel, treating it with more attention than a beautifully shaped stone. Lose the stone and another may be made. Lose the fire during wet weather and the problem becomes more serious. The flames before you settle lower. Orange light now glows beneath darkening wood, and the strongest heat comes from coals rather than tall flames. Someone places another branch carefully. The response is slow. Smoke thickens, then a thin tongue of fire appears along one edge. You find yourself watching it. There is something hypnotic about fire even now, despite everything modern life has placed between you and the natural night. For early humans, that attraction may have carried practical benefits. People who remain near a maintained fire could keep it alive. Children watching adults would learn how fuel behaves. Repeated observation turns ordinary attention into expertise. Fire teaches patiently. It burns too fast if neglected in one way and dies if neglected in another. It punishes carelessness without explaining the lesson. Over generations, people learn the rules. You place your hands closer to the warmth and notice how the skin tightens slightly in the dry heat. Behind you, the air feels surprisingly cold. That contrast makes the fire seem larger than it is. Beyond the glow, the landscape remains unchanged. Lions still roam somewhere beyond sight, hyenas still search, and night wind still travels across open grass. Yet your experience of that landscape has changed. Humans have not conquered darkness. They have created an island within it. The island is fragile. Rain can weaken it. Wind can scatter sparks. Carelessness can consume precious fuel or cause dangerous burns. Still, when it survives, it transforms the hours after sunset. The group grows quieter. One person places a tool beside the resting area. Another pulls a hide closer around the shoulders while the youngest members drift towards sleep. You hear soft cracking from the coals. The smell of smoke settles into hair, skin, and clothing, becoming part of the human scent carried into morning. Perhaps predators notice it too. Perhaps other human groups notice smoke on the horizon. A fire can reveal presence as easily as it provides safety. That tension remains unresolved. You look upward. Stars fill the sky beyond the rising smoke, while sparks occasionally climb toward them before disappearing. For one brief moment, flame and starlight seem almost connected. The people beside you do not know that their descendants will build furnaces, lamps, engines, and cities glowing across entire continents. Tonight fire is smaller than that. It is warmer, closer, more necessary. You stretch your hands toward the coals and listen as the darkness presses gently around their edges. For now, this small circle of light is enough. Section 9. Morning begins with hunger. The fire from the night before has collapsed into red coals, and thin smoke rises through the cool air. Around you, people wake slowly, stretching stiff backs and checking the few objects placed nearby before sleep. No breakfast waits in a container. Nothing has been planted for you. There are no fields beyond the camp, no domestic herd, and no cupboard holding food from last week. If you want to eat, the landscape must provide something today. I'll begin walking. The first lesson arrives quickly. Prehistoric food is not one thing. There is no single caveman diet, no neat menu repeated across Africa, and no universal plate filled only with roasted meat. Early Homo sapiens live across environments that vary enormously in rainfall, vegetation, altitude, coastlines, and animal life. Food changes with place. It also changes with season. Air wet period fills valleys with plants and herds. Months later, drying ground can push people toward root seeds, insects, shellfish, or whatever remains dependable. You follow several people toward vegetation growing near damp ground. One kneels and begins digging with a wooden stick, loosening soil around a buried root. The earth smells dark and cool. Fine-grained stick beneath fingernails, and small insects scatter whenever the soil breaks open. The food looks unimpressive, coated in mud and wrapped in tough skin, yet hidden calories are precious. Roots and tubers can remain available when fruits disappear or grazing animals move elsewhere. Some require roasting or pounding, while others may contain compounds demanding careful preparation. That knowledge cannot be guessed casually. A person must know which plants are edible, which parts are useful, and when they become dangerous. A child watching an adult dig learns where to search what leaves mark the right plant and which similar plants should be avoided. Food knowledge is social inheritance. Farther along, someone gathers small fruits from a shrub. They may contain tougher skins, larger seeds, and flavors ranging from sweet to sharply bitter. Domestication has not yet reshaped plants around human preferences. Nature does not care about presentation. You taste an imaginary fruit sweet at first and sharply sour afterward. Juice sticks to your fingers and attracts insects. Nuts and seeds can be valuable too. They are compact, rich in calories, and sometimes storable for short periods if conditions stay dry. But hard shells demand effort. A stone becomes useful. You watch someone place a nut against a firm surface and strike carefully. Too much force ruins the contents while too little wastes time. Repeated tasks create skill. Food is worthwhile only if the calories gained justify the time travel and risk needed to obtain it. An enormous animal may contain tremendous food. It can also be dangerous to acquire. A patch of shellfish does not run away. That has advantages. Near coast lakes or rivers, aquatic foods can add remarkable variety. Shellfish, fish crabs, turtles, and other resources may become important where local conditions allow. You imagine reaching a rocky shoreline, salt hangs in the air and wet stone feels cold beneath your feet. Waves withdraw, exposing shallow pools filled with life. Shells cling to rock. Collecting them requires patience rather than heroics. One quirky detail is that some ancient sites preserve shells, fish remains, and other aquatic debris, giving archaeologists direct glimpses of meals beside water. Yet many Pleistocene shorelines now lie underwater because sea levels change repeatedly. Some ancient dining places are submerged. That missing evidence may make coastal food use look rarer than it really was. Back inland meat matters in many settings. Humans may hunt, scavenge, or combine both strategies depending on opportunity and available animals. A carcass can provide protein, fat, organs, and marrow. Marrow is especially valuable. Loom bones can be broken with stones to reach the rich tissue inside. The process may appear laborious, but concentrated fat provides dense energy. You hear stone striking bone. The sound is sharp and carries across open ground. Birds gather at a cautious distance, watching for whatever people leave behind. Food attracts competition. One person works quickly while others scan nearby grass. Eating is never completely separated from awareness. Insects may also enter the diet. Termites, larvae, grasshoppers, and other small creatures can provide fat and protein, though they leave little archaeological evidence. 1,000 termites can disappear without leaving a heroic fossil record. Honey, if available, would be another extraordinary prize. Wild honey is rich in sugar, but reaching it can involve climbing smoke stings and competition. Direct evidence for gathering it this early is difficult to preserve. Some appetites have old roots. Researchers continue debating the precise balance of plant and animal foods among early Homo sapiens populations. Teeth tools, animal bones residues, and chemical evidence provide clues, but no single diet describes everyone. Environment changes the answer. A coastal group might eat differently from people living across dry interior grasslands or wetter highlands. Season adds another layer. When fruit is abundant, people may eat more fruit. When animals gather near shrinking water, meat opportunities may increase. When drought reduces, both underground foods and hardy seeds become more important. The menu follows ecology. Back at camp, gathered foods arrive in uneven quantities. Some people return with roots, others carry fruits, nuts, or pieces of animal tissue. Perhaps nobody has found enough of one thing to feed everyone comfortably. Sharing changes the arithmetic. The person who succeeds today may fail tomorrow. Food sharing can reduce that uncertainty, especially when resources are unpredictable. Exactly how sharing rules worked 300,000 years ago cannot be reconstructed confidently. Still, cooperation likely mattered. Children cannot acquire all their own food. Injured people may temporarily contribute less, while skilled individuals may find resources others cannot obtain easily. The fire becomes useful again. A root is placed near heat, not directly inside the strongest flame. Its outer surface darkens while moisture escapes slowly. The smell changes. Earthy bitterness softens into something warmer and slightly sweet. Fibers become easier to break between your teeth. Cooking can transform texture, taste, and digestibility. But scholars remain cautious about assuming every food was cooked routinely during this period. Fire use is real, yet the everyday importance of cooking around 300,000 years ago remains uncertain. You watch people eat with their hands sitting close to the ground. There are no plates arranged beautifully and no courses arriving in sequence. Yet the meal contains generations of knowledge. Someone knew where the tubers grew. Someone remembered when nuts were ready. Someone understood the animal tracks. Each mouthful carries a map. As evening approaches, very little remains. Scraps may be discarded, bones broken further, shells dropped, and useful pieces saved. By morning, insects, birds, carnivores, wind and weather will begin erasing the evidence. Most meals vanish completely. You sit beside the fading warmth and understand something simple. Early Homo sapiens do not survive because one perfect food sustains them. They survive because almost nothing edible is dismissed without consideration. Roots, fruits, seeds, shellfish, insects, marrow, meat, and whatever else the season offers can all matter. The world provides no mercy, provides no menu. So humans learn to read it. Section 10. The meal disappears quickly, but several stones remain beside the fire. At first glance, they look ordinary enough. Some are rounded, naturally others are broken, and several fit comfortably inside one hand. Yet when you watch how carefully the people around you examine them, their importance becomes obvious. Stone is not merely stone here. A suitable piece can become a cutting-edge scraper point hammer or core from which several useful flakes are removed. The difference depends on material experience and the sequence of strikes chosen by the person holding it. You sit closer. One adult turns a stone slowly beneath the morning light, examining its shape from several angles. The surface is smooth in places and rough in others, with subtle curves you would probably ignore. Then another stone strikes it. A sharp crack breaks the quiet. A thin flake separates cleanly and lands in the dust beside your foot. Its edge looks almost delicate, yet when you touch it carefully you realize how sharp fresh stone can be. It could slice skin easily. This is not random smashing. By roughly 300,000 years ago, many human populations across Africa were using technologies associated with the Middle Stone Age. Toolmakers could prepare stone cores deliberately, controlling how later flakes would detach. That requires planning. The person shaping the core must think beyond the immediate strike. Each removal changes the angles and surfaces available for the next one. The finished flake begins before it exists. You watch several blows land in a deliberate sequence. Small fragments jump away while the central stone becomes more organized rather than more chaotic. Preparation creates possibility. One method familiar to archaeologists involves shaping a core so that a later strike removes a flake with a relatively predictable form. Techniques of this general kind can produce useful points cutting flakes and other standardized pieces. The idea sounds simple. Doing it well is not. You try imagining yourself copying the sequence after watching only once. The result would probably be a collection of disappointing rocks and sore fingers. The toolmaker beside you makes it look effortless. That ease comes from practice. Children growing up around skilled adults would repeatedly see stone being selected, struck, rotated, discarded, and reused. Over years, movements become precise enough that tiny differences in angle matter. Learning can be so. A child does not need a written manual. Hands demonstrate, eyes follow. Mistakes teach. The rhythm of stone striking stone becomes part of ordinary life. You hear it again. Crack. Pause. Turn. Crack. The sound travels across the open ground sharp enough to stand out against insects and wind. Archaeologists sometimes discover enormous concentrations of flakes around ancient work areas. To modern eyes, they resemble debris. To ancient toolmakers, each fragment records a decision. Some flakes are immediately useful. Others are rejected. A promising core may travel with the group while heavy waste remains where the stone was first worked. This creates another kind of map. When archaeologists later identify stone carried far from its geological source, they gain clues about movement and connections across landscapes. A tool can reveal a journey. Imagine finding a particular rock only near one distant ridge. If pieces of that material appear many kilometers away, someone transported them directly or passed them between people. The stone remembers distance. That makes raw material selection surprisingly important. Not every rock breaks well. Certain stones fracture predictably, producing sharp edges. Others crumble, split badly, or demand more effort than they are worth. A skilled person knows the difference quickly. Color might help. Texture matters more. A promising stone feels solid and consistent without obvious cracks that could ruin controlled flaking. People may walk considerable distances to obtain better material. That tells you something about planning. If a group carries stone away from its source, they are investing effort now for needs that may arise later. Future usefulness has entered the decision. You look again at the tools. Some flakes remain simple cutting edges, while others can be shaped further into points. A stone point may eventually be attached to a wooden shaft, creating a composite tool more sophisticated than either component alone. Binding is the difficult part. Plant fibers, sinew, hide, strips, or natural adhesives can help secure stone to wood, but these materials usually decay. The stone survives. The engineering disappears. Researchers still debate exactly how widespread hafting was among the earliest Homo sapiens populations around this period. Some evidence suggests complex composite technologies appeared surprisingly early, while preservation makes their frequency difficult to establish. A point found alone cannot explain everything. Was it handheld? Was it attached to a spear? Was it used for cutting rather than hunting? The shape offers clues, but rarely a complete answer. You imagine the missing wooden shaft. It may have been straightened carefully, scraped smooth, and balanced in the hand. A stone point attached poorly could loosen at the worst moment. Composite tools demand coordination. Several materials must work together. The stone has to fit the wood. The binding must hold. Any adhesive must tolerate pressure and movement. A simple-looking spear can contain several separate technologies. That is one of the quirky surprises of ancient toolmaking. The most impressive part may be the component least likely to survive. Wood disappears. Fiber disappears. Glue disappears. Archaeologists inherit the stone and must reconstruct the invisible rest. You pick up a finished flake. Its surface catches the sun, revealing ridges left by previous removals. The edge is thin enough to cut, hide meat plants or wood. One tool can serve many tasks. Another may be resharpened repeatedly until its shape changes completely. Nothing useful is wasted casually. A damaged tool can become a smaller one. A broken point can supply sharp fragments. An exhausted core may still serve as a hammer. Efficiency matters when every object must be carried. The group begins preparing to move. Several finished pieces disappear into a hide wrapping or simple carrying container. Others remain beside the working area. The discarded flakes look unimportant again. Centuries pass. Rain covers them. Soil shifts. Vegetation grows, dies, and returns. Animals cross the same ground without noticing what lies below. Then, hundreds of thousands of years later, someone uncovers one of these flakes and realizes a human hand shaped it intentionally. The gesture returns. That connection is unusually direct. Bones tell you who people were physically. Stone tools tell you something about what they did. Even then, interpretation requires caution. A carefully prepared tool does not automatically prove modern language symbolism or identical thought processes to yours. Skill can reveal planning and learning, but the mental world behind the technique remains partly hidden. Still, sophistication is difficult to deny. You have watched the sequence. You have seen raw stone transform through anticipation rather than accident. The toolmaker understands fracture patterns through practice, even without equations describing force or angles. Knowledge can exist without formal theory. You know that already. A person can balance, throw, swim, or sing without writing down the physics involved. Ancient stoneworkers do the same. Their laboratory is the landscape. Their textbook is repetition. Their examination arrives every time a tool succeeds or fails during real work. By afternoon, the sun has warmed the stones scattered near the camp. You lift one and feel stored heat against your palm. Nearby, someone strikes another core. The crack echoes briefly through the grass. You now hear something different in that sound. Not primitiveness. Preparation. Not random violence against stone. Design. Each controlled strike represents memory carried forward through generations, shaped by observation, imitation, and countless correction. The people around you own very little by modern standards, yet what they carry in their hands is backed by an enormous invisible inheritance. They know how stone behaves. They know where good material lies. They know which edge works, and long before writing can preserve knowledge on a page, their hands are already preserving it in form. Section 11. The stone tools disappear into carrying wraps, but one need remains more urgent than everything else. Water. I begin moving again beneath a brightening sky, following a route that seems invisible to you. The people ahead do not hesitate even when the ground opens into several possible paths. They already know where they are going. A shallow depression lies beyond the next rise. Then a line of darker vegetation appears farther ahead. Those trees are not random. They are a sign. Their roots reach moisture that survives longer than the surrounding grassland, and their presence suggests water may still remain nearby. You start reading the landscape differently. A green patch can be a message. Birds can be a message. Fresh animal tracks can be another. For early Homo sapiens, finding water is not simply a matter of walking toward a river. Rivers shift, seasonal pools disappear, and springs may become unreliable during prolonged dry periods. Memory reduces uncertainty. Someone recalls where water lasted during a previous dry season. Another person recognizes that certain reeds only grow where the ground stays damp. Knowledge turns invisible resources into destinations. By late morning, heat presses down more heavily. Dust coats your ankles and your mouth feels dry enough that each breath becomes noticeable. The group keeps moving. You understand why carrying large quantities of water would be difficult. Without pottery, metal containers, or plastic vessels transporting liquid requires organic materials that rarely survive archaeologically. Hides, gourds, bark, stomachs, or other natural containers are possibilities in later societies, but evidence this early is scarce. That creates uncertainty. Researchers still debate how effectively early Homo sapiens stored and carried water across dry landscapes. The answer matters because better transport would expand the distance people could travel between reliable sources. Without containers, water controls movement tightly. With them, the map grows larger. You cross ground marked by hoofprints. Some are old and cracked around the edges. Others are darker and sharper. Fresh tracks matter more. Animals need water too, and following repeated trails can lead towards spring streams or waterholes. The wilderness becomes a network of shared information. Humans are not the only ones using it. A line of antelope tracks bends toward a low valley. Bird calls as you descend and the air cools slightly. Then you smell it. Wet soil. The scent arrives before the water becomes visible. You push through taller vegetation and find a shallow pool fed by seepage beneath a rocky bank. It is hardly impressive. No dramatic waterfall appears. No clear blue lake stretches toward the horizon. The water is cloudy near the edge marked by insects and animal prints. Still, everyone relaxes slightly. This is enough. People approach carefully. You remember the crocodiles from earlier sections, the hippos and the predators that visit water after sunset. Even a small source can attract dangerous company. The group scans the banks first. Nothing moves. Someone kneels and touches the surface. Ripples spread outward. The water feels cool against your fingers, almost shockingly so after hours of heat. You drink slowly. Mud touches your lips. It tastes mineral earthy and faintly unpleasant. It also tastes excellent. Modern people often imagine ancient survival as a constant search for food, but dehydration can become dangerous much faster than hunger. Water organizes life. It influences where camps can be placed, how far people can travel, and which routes remain practical during dry seasons. It also shapes encounters. Different human groups may repeatedly return to the same springs or river corridors. These places can become meeting points where information, materials, and people move between communities. A water source is social geography. You imagine two groups arriving from different directions. They might recognize one another. They might exchange stone. They might share news about herds' rainfall or distant conditions. Or they might avoid one another. The archaeological record rarely tells you. Stone tools can reveal repeated visits to a location, but they cannot easily reconstruct whether those visits involved friendship, rivalry, or simple coincidence. Water preserves movement better than emotion. You remain beside the pool while several people fill whatever containers they possess, if any. Others drink directly. One person wets hands and rubs dust from the face. A child splashes more than necessary. Some habits probably require no invention. The moment feels ordinary. That ordinariness matters. Human survival depends on many quiet acts repeated successfully every day. You do not need a dramatic hunt to remain alive. Sometimes the most important achievement is remembering a muddy pool behind the correct ridge. The group rests briefly in shade. Leaves whisper overhead and insects gather near the water. A dragonfly hovers above the surface, darting sideways whenever your hand moves. The air smells greener here. Plants grow more densely because moisture allows them to persist through the dry season. That concentration attracts food. Roots may be easier to find. Animals pass regularly. Birds gather. So do predators. Water creates abundance and danger at once. I begin to see why river valleys and lake margins can preserve rich archaeological sites. Humans return repeatedly. Sediments accumulate. Tools are dropped. Bones become buried. Floods cover old surfaces with new layers. A site can slowly become a layered archive. One curious detail is that ancient rivers rarely stay exactly where modern ones flow. Channels migrate across floodplains, lakes expand and contract, springs disappear. A place that now looks dry may once have stood beside water, while a modern riverbank may sit far from its ancient position. The landscape keeps moving. Archaeologists therefore reconstruct old water systems using sediments, minerals, fossils, and landforms. A dry depression may once have been a lake. Rounded stones may indicate an ancient stream. Fine silts can preserve evidence of quiet water. Geology becomes memory. You leave the pool in the afternoon carrying moisture inside your body and perhaps inside simple containers. The next destination lies farther away. Again, the group chooses a route without discussion. You follow. As you walk, you notice how often the path keeps low ridges within sight. Landmarks help orientation. A distinctive hill can guide movement across enormous distances, especially when routes are learned from childhood. At night, stars may help too. During daylight, vegetation, wind drainage, rock formations, and animal paths all provide clues. Navigation becomes layered. No single sign is enough. People combine many. That ability may explain how early humans moved through landscapes that appear trackless to you. They were not trackless to them. You pass a dry channel filled with pale stones. For part of the year, water may run here. Now it is empty. Someone bends, touches the sand beneath a shaded bank, then digs slightly. Moisture appears below the surface. You would have walked past. This small discovery reveals another level of environmental knowledge. Water does not always need to be visible. It can hide beneath sand, collect in rock hollows, or remain inside certain plants. Knowing where to look matters more than luck. Researchers cannot measure exactly how detailed such knowledge was 300,000 years ago. Still, the repeated occupation of challenging environments suggests early humans understood their landscapes with considerable sophistication. They had to. Ignorance is expensive here. By sunset, you reach a broader river. The sound arrives first, low and continuous over stones. Cool air gathers near the channel. The smell of wet vegetation becomes stronger. Across the water, animals move between trees. You sit on the bank. The current catches red evening light and carries it downstream. Someone washes a stone tool. Another studies the opposite shore. The river is a resource, but also a barrier. Crossing may be easy during low water and dangerous during floods. Season changes everything again. A route open today may become impossible after heavy rain. That forces planning across time, not just space. You look downstream and imagine the river continuing far beyond sight. It links pools, wetlands, animals, plants, and people. It may lead toward groups nobody here has met yet. It may dry farther ahead. It may divide into channels. It may vanish into a lake that will itself disappear thousands of years later. Water never promises permanence, and yet humans follow it. They remember it. They build their movements around it. As darkness settles, the river keeps moving beside you. Its surface reflects a few early stars broken into fragments by the current. The people around you relax near the bank, but not carelessly. They know tomorrow's journey begins with the same question that shaped today. Where is the next water? Section 12. The river beside you keeps flowing through darkness, but the human world extends far beyond its banks. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other people are waking beneath completely different skies. They do not belong to the early Homo sapiens populations you have been following. Their bodies carry different evolutionary histories shaped by long separations, migrations, climates, and encounters stretching across immense territories. Humanity is not one species standing alone. Not yet. Around 300,000 years ago, several human lineages occupy parts of Africa and Eurasia. Some are close relatives of Homo sapiens, while others preserve evolutionary paths that began much earlier. The family tree has many living branches. You leave the river in imagination and travel northward, crossing landscapes no individual person could cover in one simple journey. Grasslands give way to dry country, mountains rise ahead, and eventually unfamiliar seasonal cold begins shaping the land. Farther into western Eurasia, populations, ancestral or closely related to Neanderthals, are developing distinctive characteristics. Their story has already been unfolding for a long time. Cold environments favor different bodies' behaviors and survival strategies, although climate alone cannot explain every anatomical difference. These humans inhabit landscapes containing large herbivores, forests, open steppe, rocky shelters, and winters far harsher than many African regions. You would recognize them as human. That point deserves emphasis. They make tools. They move deliberately across landscapes. They cooperate. They care for vulnerable individuals, use fire, and eventually leave evidence of surprisingly complex behavior. They are not failed attempts waiting for Homo sapiens to replace them. They have their own long history. Move farther east and the picture becomes even less tidy. Asian populations include descendants of much earlier human migrations from Africa, including forms usually associated with Homo erectus. Some Homo erectus populations survive astonishingly late in parts of Asia. Their persistence is remarkable. A lineage can remain successful for hundreds of thousands of years without becoming you. That alone changes how you view evolution. Evolution has no appointment with modern humanity. It does not reward a species for moving towards some predetermined destination. A population survives when its characteristics work well enough within changing conditions. Homo erectus did that extraordinarily well. Members of that broad lineage spread across enormous areas long before Homo sapiens existed. They encountered unfamiliar climates and environments while maintaining ways of life capable of supporting generations. You are the newcomer here. Even within Africa, the situation remains complicated. Early Homo sapiens share the continent with human populations whose precise relationships are still difficult to classify. Fossils sometimes combine features that resist simple labels. One especially strange example comes from southern Africa. Homo naldi possesses a curious mixture of characteristics, including a relatively small brain case alongside hands, feet, and other anatomical features that create an unexpected mosaic. Even more surprising is its age. Fossils attributed to Homo naledi have been dated to roughly the broad period between about 35,000 and 236,000 years ago. That means creatures with this unusual anatomy may have lived during the same general era as early Homo sapiens. The discovery disrupted comfortable assumptions. You might once have expected smaller-brained, more archaic-looking human relatives to belong only to a much deeper past. Instead, evolution places different forms beside one another in time. The ancient world refuses neat staging. You imagine southern African grassland under a bright afternoon sky. Somewhere across that landscape, populations with very different bodies may occupy territories separated by the mountains, rivers, ecological zones, or simple distance. Did they encounter each other? Possibly. Then you prove a meeting. Not easily. A fossil gives you a location and an approximate age, not a record of every neighboring population. This is where the ancient human world becomes almost haunting. Two groups could live within a few hundred kilometers of one another for generations, yet leave no evidence revealing whether they ever met. Or perhaps they met repeatedly. They may have exchanged gestures, watched one another cautiously competed over resources, or simply moved apart. The stones remain silent. Genetics provides another kind of evidence. Much later Homo sapiens populations will interbreed with Neanderthals and Denisovans, leaving traces that survive inside many people today. That future genetic mixing proves something important. Human lineages were different but not always reproductively isolated in absolute terms. The boundaries were porous. Around the period you are visiting, however, exactly which populations encountered one another remains much harder to determine. Researchers continue arguing over the proper names and relationships of several Middle Pleistocene human fossils. Terms such as Homo heidelbergensis can mean different things depending on the classification system being used. The labels are modern. The populations were real. They did not know they had been assigned species names. A person beside a Eurasian fire did not think I'm part of a transitional lineage. That person felt cold hunger, fatigue, attachment, irritation, and perhaps amusement. Classification comes hundreds of millennia later. You picture another camp. The fire burns beneath a rock shelter somewhere far from the African river you left behind. People sit around it while cold wind moves across the entrance. Their faces differ from those you met earlier. Their tools may follow different traditions. Their landscape knowledge belongs to another region entirely. Still, the scene feels familiar. Someone keeps a child close. Someone checks the fire. Another person listens to the darkness. Human behavior creates echoes across distance. One quirky detail makes those echoes even stranger. Some human groups may have existed for long periods with extremely small populations compared with modern societies. Entire lineages could consist of numbers that would barely fill a modest modern town. Yet they persist for thousands of generations. Small does not mean insignificant. It means vulnerable. Disease, climate shifts, shortages, and demographic accidents can affect tiny populations severely. A few unsuccessful generations may matter enormously. Connections between groups therefore become important again. Movement is biology. Meeting outsiders can introduce new genes, relationships, and knowledge. Isolation can preserve distinctive traits, but too much isolation carries risks. You begin imagining ancient Eurasia and Africa, not as continents filled evenly with people, but as scattered islands of humanity. Some islands are separated by deserts, others by mountains, some by climate, some simply by enormous empty distances. Occasionally the islands connect. A wet corridor opens. A coastline becomes easier to follow. Game animals shift their ranges, people move, then lineages encounter one another after generations apart. What happens next may vary every time. Competition is possible, avoidance is possible, so is exchange. And as later genetic evidence demonstrates, interbreeding eventually happens between some of these branches. The human family tree begins to resemble braided water. Streams divide. They travel separately. Then some reconnect. The metaphor is imperfect, but perhaps closer to reality than a simple ladder leading upward toward you. There was never one single march. There were populations exploring different evolutionary possibilities at the same time. As evening returns in your imagined journey, you stand on a high ridge overlooking an enormous landscape. Somewhere south lie early Homo Sapiens. Far north and east lie other human populations. Beyond them stretch territories whose inhabitants remain barely visible through fragmentary fossils and genetics. No one knows which lineage will endure longest. No one knows that one branch will eventually spread across the entire planet. For now, Homo sapiens are simply one kind of human among others. That fact makes the world feel larger. It also makes it lonelier in retrospect. Every other human lineage you have imagined will eventually disappear as a distinct population, although some will leave genetic traces within later Homo sapiens. But none of that has happened yet. Tonight the human family is still crowded. Different fires burn beneath different skies. Different faces turn toward them. And across 3 continents, several kinds of humans are quietly living at once. Section 30. The different human fires remain scattered across distant continents, but your attention returns to the smaller circle beside you. Here survival depends less on abstract species and more on familiar faces. You wake before sunrise while the air is still cool enough to raise tiny bumps along your arms. Someone nearby shifts beneath a hide covering and another person feeds dry twigs into fading coals. A child is already awake. The child watches everything. That may be one of the most important details in the camp. Human children remain dependent far longer than the young of many other mammals. They must learn what to eat, where water lies, how tools are made, which animals are dangerous, and how people behave toward one another. Childhood is an apprenticeship. You watch an adult pick up a stone core. The child edges closer. No formal lesson begins. There is no classroom, no written instruction, and no spoken rule you can translate. The adult simply works while the child observes each turn of the wrist. A flake breaks away. The child reaches toward it. The adult moves the sharp edge aside, then places a safer stone into the smaller hand. Teaching may begin this quietly. Imitation becomes practice. Practice becomes competence. Over years, thousands of such moments can transform an inexperienced child into someone who understands the landscape almost automatically. That learning depends on other people. Early Homo sapiens probably lived in small social groups connected to wider networks of relatives and acquaintances. Exact group sizes remain uncertain, but human survival clearly favors cooperation across many daily tasks. Children make this obvious. A single parent gathering every calorie while carrying, protecting, and teaching several dependent children would face an enormous burden. Other adults can help. Older siblings can help too. Grandparents may matter. Humans are unusual in the extent to which care can spread beyond a mother and infant pair. Anthropologists often describe this broader pattern as cooperative breeding, although its exact development deep in prehistory remains debated. You can see why it would be useful. A woman digs for underground foods while another adult watches 2 children nearby. Someone else returns from the river carrying material that may be shared later. No written contract organizes any of this, yet expectations exist. If everyone consumed food but nobody shared effort, the system would fail quickly. Social life therefore requires memory of people as well as places. Who usually helps, who takes more than they give, who is skilled at finding water, who remains calm near dangerous animals. Reputation may be invisible, but it matters. You begin realizing that ancient social worlds could be complicated without having chiefs, laws, or official institutions. Human relationships do not need paperwork to become political. A disagreement can begin over feud. Another may involve a tool. Someone may become irritated because another person ignores a warning or approaches a dangerous area with a child. The voices rise briefly, then they soften. Perhaps another person intervenes and You cannot know the words, but conflict management itself would have survival value. A group that constantly fractures loses knowledge and support. A group that never resists selfish behavior creates different problems. Some balance must emerge. Researchers cannot reconstruct those rules directly. They study later. Foraging societies, primate behavior archaeology, and evolutionary models then carefully consider what might apply to deeper prehistory. The comparisons are useful but not imperfect. Modern hunter-gatherer societies are not fossils. They have their own histories, so you resist copying any one living culture backward by 300,000 years. Still, several broad human tendencies probably have deep roots. Food sharing is one. Care for injured people is another. Childhood learning is unmistakably important. So is attachment. You notice an older individual resting near the shade of a tree. The person walks more slowly than younger adults and does not join every task. Yet others remain nearby, occasionally passing food or helping with movement. This imagined scene is plausible because much older hominin fossils sometimes show individuals surviving serious injuries or conditions that would have made independent survival difficult. Care predates modern civilization. How organized that care was remains uncertain. It may have ranged from temporary assistance to long-term support. Some injuries heal only when a person survives weeks or months after receiving them, which can imply tolerance and help from others. A healed bone is a strangely intimate clue. It does not tell you who brought food. It does not tell you who waited. It only tells you that the injured person continued living. The rest must be inferred carefully. Nearby, children begin playing. That may sound like an unnecessary detail, but play has practical value. Chasing, balancing, throwing, imitating adults, and manipulating objects allow young humans to develop coordination and social understanding. A game can become training without anyone calling it training. Child throws a stick badly. Another laughs. The first tries again. Apparently embarrassment may be older than agriculture. The moment passes quickly. You hear insects buzzing in the warm air and smell crushed leaves where several people have been sitting. Someone breaks apart a fibrous plant, perhaps preparing it for another use. The camp feels domestic without being permanent. People recognize one another's habits. One person always chooses a particular resting place. Another seems to work better in silence. Someone else may be unusually patient with children. Individual personalities almost certainly exist even if archaeology cannot recover them. That absence can make prehistory feel more uniform than it was. Stone tools survive. Bad jokes do not. Affection does not fossilize either. Neither does jealousy, loyalty, annoyance, or friendship. Yet these emotions shape group life as surely as hunger does. You watch two adults sit close together while working. They exchange an object without looking directly at one another. The movement is practiced. Familiarity lives in gestures. Kinship probably matters strongly, but not every important relationship needs to be biological. Humans can form alliances, friendships, partnerships, and obligations beyond immediate family. That flexibility may help connect small groups into larger social networks. Such networks matter during shortages. If one local area becomes dry, relationships elsewhere can provide information or access. Marriage or mating partnerships may also connect communities. Exactly how early? Homo sapiens' organized pair bonds, residence patterns, or kinship categories remains impossible to determine confidently. Scholars still disagree about how much of later human family structure can be projected into this period. There may have been considerable variation. One group could behave differently from another. Traditions can diverge even when technology looks similar. That is another invisible layer of prehistoric diversity. You might travel 200 kilometers and encounter people who shape the stone in familiar ways but follow very different social customs. Perhaps they greet visitors differently. Perhaps food is divided according to different expectations. Perhaps certain relatives remain together after partnerships form while others disperse. No surviving rulebook explains it. You would have to learn by watching. As afternoon cools, several people prepare to move short distances from camp. Before leaving, they exchange gestures and sounds. Some remain with the youngest children. Others head toward vegetation or water. Roles appear flexible rather than fixed. A skilled gatherer may also shape stone. A hunter may carry a child. An older person may contribute knowledge more than physical effort. Human cooperation benefits from overlapping abilities. Rigid specialization would be difficult in a small mobile group. Everyone needs enough knowledge to survive ordinary problems. Yet exceptional skills still matter. The best tracker may see what others miss. The most experienced plant gatherer may prevent poisoning. Someone with a steady hand may produce better points. Social groups contain expertise before they contain professions. Evening returns gently. People gather again as the light softens across the grass. Food appears in small portions from several sources. Pieces pass between hands. Children receive some. Older people receive some. You cannot tell whether distribution follows formal rules or flexible expectations. But nobody here survives entirely alone. That becomes the strongest impression. 300,000 years before written laws, human life is already surrounded by obligations. Care must be remembered. Knowledge must be shared. Children must be taught. Conflict must sometimes be contained. The group itself becomes a tool, though no one can hold it in a hand. As darkness reaches the camp, bodies settle near one another again. You hear low voices, movement in dry grass, and the familiar crack of a small fire. Beyond the light waits a dangerous world. Inside it, people create something equally ancient. They create belonging. Section 14. Belonging surrounds you in the darkness, but now you begin listening more carefully to the sounds holding it together. The fire has settled into a low orange glow, and smoke drifts gently beneath the cool night air. Someone speaks from across the circle using sounds you cannot understand, followed by a brief gesture toward the river. Another person answers. A child watches both faces. You are hearing a conversation that no archaeologist will ever recover. Words leave no bones. Sentences do not fossilize. Even if these early Homo sapiens possess complex speech, almost every syllable disappears the instant it enters the air. That makes language one of prehistory's deepest mysteries. You know that modern humans depend upon language for teaching, planning, memory, social relationships, and coordination. Yet identifying exactly when fully developed language emerged remains extraordinarily difficult. There is no preserved first sentence. There is no ancient recording. There is only anatomy, genetics, archaeology, and careful inference. You lean closer to the group. Their communication is clearly more than random noise. One person points toward a dark ridge while producing several sounds in quick succession. Another looks in the same direction, then responds with a different rhythm. Perhaps they are discussing water, perhaps animals, perhaps tomorrow's movement. You cannot translate anything. Still, intention seems unmistakable. Humans are excellent at combining voice, facial expression, posture, and gesture. Even today, a raised eyebrow can change the meaning of an entire sentence. Early people probably used similar combinations. Speech may not have replaced gesture. It may have grown alongside it. The anatomy needed for vocal communication has deep evolutionary roots. Breath control, hearing, tongue movement, brain organization, and the structure of the vocal tract all contribute. No single fossil proves language. A particular bone shape may suggest possibilities, but speech depends on much more than anatomy alone. The brain matters enormously. Unfortunately, not to late brain's decay. Skulls can preserve impressions of overall brain shape, but they cannot reveal vocabulary, grammar, or the private meaning shared among people. You are left with indirect clues. One important clue is social complexity. The people around you must remember. Roots teach tool-making, coordinate movement, warn about predators, and maintain relationships among group members. Simple calls could accomplish some of this. Complex planning likely benefits from richer communication. That does not prove a modern language system existed 300,000 years ago. It makes the question harder to dismiss. You listen as one adult produces a short sequence, pauses, then repeats part of it more slowly. The child responds incorrectly. Several people react. Maybe someone laughs. That tiny moment suggests another possibility: correction. If language is learned, socially children need repeated exposure to meaningful sounds. They hear patterns long before understanding every detail. A prehistoric camp would be full of such learning. Names may have existed. Warnings almost certainly did. Directions would have been valuable. Words for body parts, foods, animals, relatives, places, actions, or emotions could all become useful. But usefulness does not tell you exactly how grammar worked. Perhaps sentences were structurally complex. Perhaps communication relied more heavily on shared context and gesture. The truth remains beyond direct reach. Researchers still debate whether fully modern language emerged before Homo sapiens, with early Homo sapiens, or substantially later. Some argue that the cognitive foundations are ancient, while others emphasize later symbolic evidence. The disagreement continues because language leaves such faint traces. You can hold a stone where you hold a stone point. You cannot hold a verb. Still, technology provides intriguing hints. Prepared core methods require sequences of actions learned through practice. Teaching such skills can happen through imitation, but spoken explanation might make learning more efficient. Composite tools add another layer. Imagine explaining how much binding material to use, where to place it, and how long an adhesive must set. You can demonstrate much of this. Words would help. That possibility does not prove language, but it reveals how useful flexible communication could become. The camp grows quieter for a moment. Someone throws a small branch onto the fire, producing sparks and a sudden burst of light. Then a strange sound breaks the silence. It resembles a click. Perhaps the speaker's language includes sounds unfamiliar to you. Modern human languages use an extraordinary range of consonants, vowels, tones, clicks, rhythms, and grammatical systems. There is no reason to assume the earliest languages sounded like modern English. They may have sounded completely unfamiliar. That thought is oddly delightful. If you could hear them clearly, you might recognize human emotion but understand nothing else. A joke could pass through the group. Everyone laugh. halves accept you. 300,000 years of linguistic change would make you the confused outsider at the world's oldest dinner conversation. Language can separate as easily as it connects. Different groups may develop distinct ways of speaking, especially when populations remain apart for generations. When they meet again, communication might be easy, difficult, or somewhere between. Gestures could help bridge gaps. Repeated contact could create shared expressions. Children growing between communities might become especially skilled at navigating differences. None of this survives clearly, yet linguistic diversity is one reasonable possibility in a continent filled with scattered populations. You imagine traveling several days and hearing voices with noticeably different rhythms. The people beside you recognize them as outsiders before anyone sees a face. Accent may be ancient, so may imitation, so may teasing someone for pronouncing something strangely. Humanity has probably been creative with other people's speech for a very long time. The quirky detail is impossible to verify, but the possibility fits the broader flexibility of human communication. What can be established more firmly is that modern speech requires unusually precise control of breathing. Humans can release air slowly while shaping complex vocal sequences rather than simply exhaling during automatic calls. That control overlaps with other behaviors. Singing is one. Rhythmic chanting is another possibility. Whether early Homo sapiens sang remains unknown, but the human voice is capable of far more than practical commands. You stare into the fire. Perhaps someone hum. The sound could calm a child. It could accompany repetitive work. It could mark social closeness. Music and language may share ancient roots, though their exact relationship remains debated. Again, the archaeological silence is enormous. You can recover pigments, bones, and tools. You cannot recover melody from open air. Sound shapes human space. A voice can reach someone beyond the firelight. A shout can warn people across a valley. A whisper can remain private. Different volumes create different social distances. Early humans may have used those possibilities constantly. The night gives you a chance to notice them. A person near the camp edge calls softly. Someone answers from darkness. The exchange lasts only seconds. You feel how useful that would be when visibility is poor. Language extends awareness beyond sight. It can also move information through time. A person can describe water not currently visible. That is powerful. You can tell someone about a dangerous place encountered yesterday. You can explain where animals moved 3 days ago. You can warn children about a predator they have never seen. Communication allows experience to travel between minds. That may be one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. Individual knowledge becomes collective knowledge. Collective knowledge becomes tradition. Tradition can survive a person's death. You think back to the remembered waterholes, tool-making skills, and social expectations carried by this group. Language, whatever, its exact form may help bind those memories together. By now, voices around the fire have softened. The child who listened earlier is asleep against an adult's side. A few people continue speaking quietly. You cannot distinguish words. You hear rhythm, pause, response, or occasional laughter. Nothing about it feels primitive. It feels intimate. You understand that the mystery of early language may never be solved with a single discovery. Instead, evidence will continue accumulating from anatomy, genetics, tools, symbolism, and comparisons across human lineages. The answer may remain gradual. Speech probably did not appear in one dramatic moment. It likely developed through long evolutionary changes in bodies, brains, and social behavior. That slow emergence suits everything else you have seen. Humanity rarely begins with a trump. It accumulates quietly. The fire dims further. One last voice crosses the darkness soft enough that you almost miss it. You cannot understand the sentence, but you recognize the human act completely. Someone speaks, someone listens, and meaning passes between them. Section 15. Meaning passes between people, but not everything meaningful needs to be spoken. Morning light returns across the camp, revealing objects that seemed ordinary in darkness. A stone lies beside a hide. Several flakes rest near yesterday's working place, and a small piece of reddish mineral catches the sun. Someone picks it up. The color is striking. It is deeper than the surrounding soil, somewhere between rust and dried clay, and it stains the fingers when rubbed against another surface. You recognize it as ochre. Iron-rich minerals capable of producing red, yellow, and brown pigments occur naturally in many places. Humans and earlier hominins collected such materials long before painted caves became famous. That matters. Around the broad period when early Homo sapiens were appearing, pieces of pigment begin joining the archaeological evidence from several African sites. Some were deliberately transported, rubbed, scraped, or modified. The exact purpose is uncertain. Perhaps pigment-colored skin. Perhaps it treated hides. Perhaps it helped prepare adhesives or protect materials. Or perhaps sometimes colour carried social meaning. You watch the person rub ochre against stone. A fine reddish powder gathers beneath the hand. The motion is patient. Nothing about it tells you why the pigment matters, and that is precisely the archaeological problem. A red mineral is not automatically the art. That assumption would be too easy. Pigments can serve practical purposes, especially when mixed with other substances. Ochre may affect hide processing, adhesive preparation, or protection against insects and sunlight. Practical and symbolic uses can also overlap. Humans are extremely good at making useful things meaningful and meaningful things useful. A piece of coloured material might help prepare equipment while also marking identity, occasion, or preference. You do that constantly in your own world. Clothing keeps you warm, but it can also communicate status. Food nourishes you, yet meals become ceremonies. A shelter blocks rain while becoming a place filled with memories. Function and meaning rarely remain separated for long. The same may be true here. You watch a second person examine a piece of stone with an unusual colour or texture. It is not necessarily the most efficient material available, yet it receives careful attention. Choice itself can become revealing. Early humans sometimes carried raw materials across considerable distances. Good stone obviously justifies travel, but certain materials may have been selected for qualities beyond simple usefulness. Perhaps colour mattered. Perhaps rarity mattered. Perhaps the object reminded someone of a particular place. Those possibilities are difficult to prove. This is where researchers become careful. They search for repeated patterns. One scratched object might be accidental. Many objects modified in similar ways suggest intention. Pigment found repeatedly in occupation layers becomes more interesting than a single red stone lying naturally in the soil. Context changes interpretation. Others begin walking toward a nearby rocky outcrop with several members of the group. The morning air is cool and dew clings briefly to shaded plants. Birds move between branches while insects warm slowly beneath the rising sun. Someone stops at exposed rock. Several pieces are examined. Most are ignored. One is collected. Again, selection matters. The person seems to understand what will happen when this material is ground or struck. Knowledge is being applied before the object changes form. Planning appears everywhere now. You noticed it in prepared stone cores. You saw it in remembering water. You heard it in possible conversations about places beyond sight. Now you notice it in materials gathered for future use. A mind can live partly in tomorrow. That ability sounds ordinary because you use it every day. Here it becomes extraordinary. An animal may respond brilliantly to immediate problems, yet humans increasingly create chains of action whose benefits arrive much later. Collect this mineral now. Carry it several kilometers. Grind it afterward. Mix it with something else. Use it when needed. That sequence requires memory and anticipation. It also requires trust that the future will resemble expectations closely enough for preparation to matter. The people around you seem comfortable with that uncertainty. They have no written calendar. They still plan. Perhaps the most important transformation in early human behavior is not a sudden explosion of intelligence, but a gradual increase in how many ideas can be combined. Stone meets wood. Pigment meets liquid. Memory meets root. Observation meets teaching. Separate abilities become networks. The mind grows powerful through connections. You return toward camp and notice someone arranging several objects beside the fire. A pointed flake rests near a wooden foil. Fibrous material lies nearby. Another substance, perhaps resin or plant gum, has been prepared. No single component is remarkable. Together they can become something new. Composite technology requires imagining a finished object before all its parts are joined. The result exists first inside the mind. That may sound philosophical. It is also practical. You cannot build a multi-part tool efficiently if each step is unrelated to the next. The maker must understand sequence. This ability does not suddenly appear with Homo sapiens, and earlier humans also planned complex actions. Still increasing combinations of materials and techniques become especially important in later human technological traditions. The roots may reach deeply into periods like this one. You sit beside the maker. A small amount of reddish powder is mixed with another substance. Perhaps the mixture with help an adhesive. Perhaps it has another use entirely. Archaeologists still argue about how often early ochre use should be interpreted symbolically rather than technically. The distinction matters. If pigment marks bodies or objects for social reasons, it may suggest communication extending beyond spoken language. Colour can signal identity without a sentence. Imagine two neighbouring groups. One favours a particular pigment. Another uses a different style of tool or ornament. When people meet, appearance may reveal something before anyone speaks. You already understand this instinctively. Humans categorize quickly. Clothing, hairstyle, objects, and decorations still announce belonging today. Whether early Homo sapiens did this 300,000 years ago remains uncertain, but the possibility sits quietly beside the ochre. A quirky thought occurs. Someone may simply like red. Personal preference is almost impossible to detect in archaeology. You tend to imagine ancient objects as purely functional because surviving evidence feels serious and remote. Yet individuals may have enjoyed certain colours, shapes, textures, or arrangements for reasons no scholar could recover. Taste may be ancient, so may vanity. Perhaps someone chooses a smoother stone because it feels pleasant. Perhaps another person dislikes a particular smell. Maybe one individual enjoys placing objects neatly while someone else leaves tools everywhere. Not every behaviour needs a grand evolutionary explanation. Human minds contain habits. You look around the camp with that possibility in mind. The scene changes. Objects no longer seem anonymous. A worn stone may belong repeatedly to one person. A particular working area may be preferred by another. A piece of pigment might be saved longer than necessary. Small preferences could create patterns that vanish before archaeology ever sees them, yet some patterns survive. Later African sites will preserve engraved objects, beads, organized pigment hues, and other signs widely interpreted as symbolic behavior. Those examples occur much later than the moment you are visiting. Still, they did not appear from nothing. The mental capacities allowing symbols probably developed gradually interacting with social life, language, memory, and technology. There may be no clean starting point. Scholars continue debating when behavior deserves the label modern. That phrase itself can mislead. Modern anatomy does not automatically produce modern behavior. Modern behavior does not appear everywhere at once. Populations may innovate, lose techniques, rediscover them, or preserve traditions that remain invisible archaeologically. Human culture can advance unevenly. It can also retreat. A clever technique disappears if too few people know it. An idea can vanish when a population becomes isolated. Innovation depends on social transmission as much as invention. This helps explain why the archaeological record often looks like scattered sparks rather than steady progress. Something appears, then it vanishes. Much later, something similar returns. History is not climbing a staircase. It is crossing difficult ground. Afternoon light turns the reddish powder brighter against stone. Someone wipes stained fingers against skin, leaving a faint mark. You cannot know whether the mark is accidental. You also cannot stop wondering. Perhaps that uncertainty is the most honest way to stand beside these early humans. You do not need to force them into modern categories. You simply watch evidence of increasingly flexible minds. They select. They prepare. They combine. They remember. They teach. And sometimes perhaps they create meaning where pure survival does not require it. The sun lowers slowly. A piece of ochre remains near the edge of the firelight, glowing almost like an ember that refuses to burn. You look at it for a long time. It may be only a useful mineral. It may be something more. 300,000 years later, you are still trying to decide. Section 60. The red pigment beside the fire survives the evening, but the weather surrounding it never stays the same for long. You walk beneath a sky that looked clear only hours ago. Now heavy clouds have gathered beyond the hills, turning the morning light grey and flat. Wind moves through the grass in broad waves, carrying the smell of damp soil before any rain reaches you. People notice immediately. A few objects are moved closer to shelter while hides are gathered from exposed ground. Someone checks the direction of the wind and looks toward a low valley. Nothing here is truly permanent. Not the lake, not the grassland, not even the reliable path you followed yesterday. Across thousands of years early, Homo sapiens lived through repeated changes in rainfall temperature, vegetation and water availability. Some changes unfold slowly across many generations, while others can be experienced within a single lifetime. A wet decade can become dry. A dependable stream can weaken. A familiar hunting area can lose the animals that once made it valuable. Climate becomes a moving boundary. I'll begin walking as the first rain arrives. Drops strike your shoulders, cool and widely spaced at first. Within minutes, the ground darkens and the smell of dust changes into the rich scent of wet earth. The storm strengthens. Water runs between stones and collects inside shallow depressions. Dry channels begin filling, turning harmless-looking paths into streams of brown water. Everyone adjusts. A route that seemed easy yesterday may now become inconvenient or dangerous. Mud slows movement, wet hides become heavier, and firewood becomes harder to use. Rain gives life. It also creates problems. That contradiction defines much of the Pleistocene world. Periods of stronger rainfall can expand lakes and encourage vegetation and open travel corridors across regions that were previously dry. Yet too much rain can flood lowlands, alter river courses, and push animals into different habitats. Dryness brings another set of changes. Waterholes shrink, plants become sparse, grazing herds move, humans follow, adapt, or sometimes leave. You imagine remaining in the same broad region for several decades. At first, tall grasses dominate the valley. Later, shrubs spread. Then several unusually dry years reduce the wetland until cracked mud replaces water near the edges. A child raised beside the lake may become an adult beside a much smaller one. The landscape can age with you. There is something unsettling about that. Modern maps encourage you to imagine geography as fixed, but ancient people experience environmental boundaries as temporary. The forest edge shifts. The desert advances. A river cuts a new course. A spring disappears after years of reduced rainfall. People must remember not only where resources are, but how reliable they have been through time. Memory becomes a record of change. An older person may say that a certain valley once held more water. A younger person may know it only as dry ground. Both are correct. That difference between generations could influence decisions about movement risk and where to search during difficult seasons. You can almost hear the argument. One person wants to return to an old water source. Another doubts that anything remains there. Experience competes with recent evidence. Ancient families probably had weather disagreements too. The storm above you finally weakens. Water drips from leaves and insects return almost immediately. Steam rises faintly from warm ground as sunlight breaks through the clouds. Everything smells alive. For several days the valley may become easier. Fresh shoots appear. Small pools fill. Animals spread into areas they avoided during the dry period. Then the water begins disappearing again. Seasonal rhythm is only the smallest layer. Beyond it lie much longer, climatic swings connected with changes in Earth's orbit. Ocean circulation, atmospheric patterns, and global ice volume. The people around you cannot see those mechanisms. They feel the consequences. A region may remain wetter for generations, allowing human groups to expand into new territory. Then conditions reverse. The same route becomes increasingly difficult. Groups that once met regularly may lose contact. This isolation can last astonishingly long. When climate improves again, descendants of those separated populations may reconnect after thousands of years apart. You have already seen how this could influence human evolution. Now you feel how personal it might have been. Climate is not merely a graph. It changes where your relatives live. It changes which foods your children learn to gather. It changes which animals you recognize. It may even change which strangers eventually become part of your community. One unusual detail lies hidden beneath ancient lake sediments. Layers of mud can preserve pollen, microscopic organisms, and chemical traces that reveal environmental changes far older than any human memory. A quiet lake can become a climate archive. During wet periods, one set of plants may dominate. During dry intervals, different pollen appears. Scientists can later read those layers almost like pages, though the pages are never perfectly complete. The people beside you know none of this. They simply notice reeds disappearing from a shoreline. That difference in scale is striking. You see both the human experience and the geological pattern. They see weather becoming life. The hardest scholarly question is not whether climate changed dramatically. It certainly did. The uncertainty concerns how directly particular climatic shifts cause particular human movements, technologies, or population changes. Scientists continue debating those links. A drought might encourage migration, but people could also remain and change their diets. A wetter period might open a corridor, yet humans would not automatically use it. Climate creates as possibilities. People still make choices. That distinction prevents the ancient world from becoming a mechanical story where rainfall pushes humans around like pieces on a board. Culture matters. Knowledge matters. Relationships matter. Luck matters too. Two neighboring groups facing similar conditions may respond differently because one knows a distant spring and the other does not. One group may have relatives elsewhere. Another may lack those connections. Environment sets pressures, but human flexibility shapes the response. You notice that flexibility during the following days. After the storm, people collect foods that become briefly abundant. Small animals appear near temporary pools. Fresh plant growth attracts larger herbivores. A place that seemed exhausted suddenly becomes useful again. Nobody assumes it will remain that way. The group stores knowledge more reliably than food. You travel towards slightly higher ground. From there, the valley spreads below you, beneath a clear afternoon sky. Patches of standing water reflect sunlight while darker soil marks the path of recent flooding. You imagine the same view several thousand years later. Perhaps woodland will replace part of the grassland. Perhaps drought will erase the pools. Perhaps humans will leave entirely. The thought feels less dramatic now. Change is normal here. Stability is the unusual condition. Even temperature varies across broader cycles. Africa is not buried beneath continental ice, but cooler global periods can alter rainfall and vegetation across vast regions. Higher elevations become colder. Dry seasons may strengthen. Some habitats contract while others expand. People carry clothing, fire, and knowledge into these shifts. They do not need to control climate. They need to outlast its surprises. That may be one of the defining qualities of Homo sapiens. Not strength alone, not one perfect technology, adaptability. You think back to the Green Sahara, shifting rivers, changing animal ranges, and mobile camps you've already followed. They're all connected. The world keeps changing faster than traditions can become completely comfortable. So traditions must remain flexible too. By evening, clouds return along the horizon. This time no rain reaches you. The sky simply darkens into purple and grey while cool air settles across the ridge. Someone watches the clouds for several moments. Then everyone continues preparing for night. No prediction is certain. Tomorrow may be dreary. Next season may be wetter. The valley may remain useful for years or slowly become a place remembered only by older people. You sit beside the fire and feel cooler air move across your face. Around you, Homo sapiens are learning one lesson again and again. The Earth does not promise consistency, so survival belongs partly to those who can change with it. Section 17. The clouds thin after sunset and the sky opens slowly above you. At first, only a few bright stars appear between fading bands of violet and grey. Then darkness deepens and thousands more emerge until the entire sky seems crowded with light. There is no artificial glow anywhere. No distant city stains the horizon orange, and no road sends headlights across the plain. The night is dark in a way that most modern people rarely experience. You look upward for a long time. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a pale river, dense with stars and broken only by drifting cloud. Its brightness feels almost solid against the surrounding blackness. Round you, the camp grows quieter. Someone adds a small branch to the fire and sparks rise briefly before disappearing into the larger field of stars. The air has cooled enough that you feel the difference whenever you move beyond the fire's warmth. The ground beneath you is firm and slightly cold. Dry grass brushes against your hand. Smoke clings to your hair and skin. Far away an animal calls, once then falls silent. This is the night sky early Homo sapiens knew. They did not need to travel somewhere remote to see it. It was simply there. Every clear evening revealed a universe without electric interruption, and every person grew up beneath patterns returning across seasons. That repetition must have been noticeable. Stars appear in familiar positions. Some rise earlier at particular times of year. The moon changes shape through a cycle obvious to anyone who looks regularly. I begin to understand how easily the sky could become part of memory. A person might connect a bright star with a season. Another might notice that certain animals migrate when particular patterns return. Perhaps moonlight influences when people travel at night. These possibilities are reasonable. Proving them is another matter. Researchers have no direct record of how early Homo sapiens interpreted the sky 300,000 years ago. Astronomy leaves almost no clear archaeological trace this early. The stars survive. Their meanings do not. You lean back and continue watching. The darkness is not completely black because starlight and firelight provide faint outlines of nearby bodies. Someone moves a few steps away, becoming almost invisible within seconds. Night changes distance. A person standing 20 meters away can see much farther. That limited visibility makes sound more important. You hear breathing nearby. Wood cracks in the fire. Insects maintain a continuous low rhythm. Occasionally grass shifts when some small animal passes through it. The earlier predators remain in your thoughts, but fear does not dominate every moment. People still need sleep. That simple requirement shapes the entire night. Humans cannot remain fully alert until sunrise. Bodies demand rest, especially after long days of walking, carrying, gathering, and toolmaking. Sleep therefore becomes a compromise. You need enough rest to function tomorrow. You also live in a world containing predators, cold insects, weather, and unfamiliar sounds. Sleeping together helps. One person wakes while another sleeps more deeply. Someone tends the fire. A child rests beside adults. The group becomes a small network of overlapping awareness. Modern researchers remain interested in how ancient humans slept because present-day sleep often occurs in enclosed temperature-controlled rooms. That environment is unusual in evolutionary terms. For most of human existence, sleep happened closer to weather, fire, animals, and other people. The body you inhabit tonight evolved under those conditions. You may drift towards sleep while sounds continue around you. You may wake briefly when the fire changes, then you settle again. Sleep need not be a single uninterrupted block. Some scholars have explored whether human sleep patterns in traditional societies differ from common modern assumptions, especially regarding nighttime waking and social interaction. Yet projecting any one pattern directly into deep prehistory would be risky. Early Homo sapiens probably slept differently across climates, seasons, and social settings. There was no universal prehistoric bedtime. That would have been convenient. Instead, rain, cold, danger, infants, illness, insects, and hunger could all rearrange the night. You turn toward the fire. One adult is awake working quietly with a small object. Perhaps the person cannot sleep. Perhaps watching the fire is a responsibility. Perhaps both are true. The glow catches the side of the face, leaving the rest in shadow. You wonder what happens inside the mind during these quiet hours. Memory may return easily at night. A dangerous encounter from earlier could be discussed. A successful journey might be remembered. Someone who died could be spoken about. Children might hear stories involving animals, relatives, or places beyond their own experience. You cannot know whether formal storytelling exists here, but humans are naturally drawn to sequences of events. Something happened. Someone did something. Then something changed. That basic structure requires no writing. Firelight creates an ideal setting for it. One person speaks, others listen. The darkness removes much of the surrounding visual world, leaving faces, voices, and flame closer together. Stories could become more powerful here. Again, archaeology cannot preserve them. No storyteller leaves behind a fossilized plot. Still, the social setting is compelling. Later human societies across the world use nighttime for conversation, storytelling, singing, ritual, and memory. It is possible that some of those habits reach very deep roots. Possible does not mean proven. You hold both ideas gently. A quirky thought comes as you watch the stars. These people may know the night sky better than almost anyone alive today, not scientifically in the modern sense. They do not calculate stellar distances or orbital mechanics, but familiarity is another kind of knowledge. They may recognize subtle seasonal changes you would miss completely. A star slightly farther west, a moon rising later, a familiar pattern appearing before dawn. You might know more astronomy from books. They may know more ski. That distinction feels important. Knowledge depends on attention. The night demands attention naturally. There is very little else to distract you. You look toward the eastern horizon where several bright stars are beginning to rise. Perhaps someone beside you notices them too. No words are exchanged. Maybe the pattern carries no special meaning. Maybe it marks a remembered season. You cannot tell. The uncertainty makes the moment quieter. Cold settles more heavily after midnight. People pull hides closer around their bodies. Firelight shrinks as fuel burns down. The smell of smoke becomes softer, mixed now with damp earth and human scent. You can hear the river in the distance. Its sound is faint but steady. The sky appears to rotate almost imperceptibly as hours pass. Of course, Earth is turning beneath you. The people here do not know that in modern scientific terms, yet they experience the regular movement of the heavens every night. Patterns rise, patterns cross, patterns disappear. Time is written above them. The moon may provide an even more obvious rhythm. Its changing phases unfold across roughly a month, altering nighttime brightness. A full moon transforms the landscape. Shadows become visible. Travel becomes easier. Predators and prey may behave differently. A moonless night feels much darker. Such changes would be impossible to ignore. Whether early humans counted lunar cycles deliberately remains unknown. Scholars have proposed very ancient forms of counting based on later marked objects, but convincing evidence from 300,000 years ago is lacking. You should not invent a lunar calendar. Still noticing is almost unavoidable. The difference between a bright and dark night is physical. You feel it. Tonight the moon is only partly visible. Its light catches the edges of distant grass and creates a pale shine along the river. The landscape seems softer than it did during daylight. Danger remains somewhere beyond sight, but so does beauty. That balance may be easy to forget when imagining prehistory. The ancient world was difficult, but difficulty did not erase wonder. A person could be tired and still notice stars. Someone could worry about tomorrow's water while enjoying warm firelight. Fear and beauty can exist together. They often do. Eventually voices disappear. The camp enters its quietest period. Only one person remains sitting upright near the coals. You lie beneath the open sky and feel your breathing slow. The stars continue moving with perfect indifference. No empire has risen. No city has been built. No written story exists. Yet human beings are already lying awake beneath the same galaxy you see today. The distance between your night and theirs feels immense. Then one meteor crosses the sky. It flashes silently for a second and vanishes. Perhaps someone notices. Perhaps you both do. For that brief moment, 300,000 years seem very small. Section 8. The meteor vanishes, but by morning the people beneath it are moving again. They leave no road behind them. Only footprints cross the damp soil, followed by scattered impressions where someone paused beneath a tree. Within days, wind and animals will erase even those small traces. Movement is ordinary here. For early Homo sapiens, Africa is not a fixed homeland divided by modern borders. It is an immense landscape of rivers, mountains, wetlands, grasslands, forests, coastlines, and deserts whose boundaries repeatedly shift. Sometimes those changes invite movement. Sometimes they prevent it. You follow the group away from the river, while cool morning air still rests in the valleys. Their pace is steady rather than hurried, and everyone seems to recognize the direction. No one is migrating across a continent today. Most movements are probably much smaller. A group may travel between familiar water sources, seasonal food patches, stone outcrops, or meeting places used repeatedly across generations. Yet small movements accumulate. Children grow up. Partnerships form. Some individuals join neighboring groups. Others leave with relatives. Over centuries, populations can spread far beyond the territories their ancestors knew. Human expansion does not require a single heroic march. It can happen one ordinary journey at a time. That idea changes how you imagine early migration. There is no leader standing on a hill and announcing that humanity will now occupy another region. People simply respond to opportunities, relationships, shortages, curiosity, and changing environments. A wet valley appears farther north. Animals begin using it. Humans eventually follow. A drought later forces another group southward. Generations afterwards, descendants of those populations may meet again. Africa becomes a continent of repeated separation and reconnection. This may have been especially important during the long period when Homo sapiens was taking shape. Fossils associated with early members of our species appear in widely separated parts of Africa. Important remains come from northern, eastern, and southern regions rather than one tiny geographic point. That broad distribution matters. It supports a growing view that our species emerged through interactions among populations spread across much of Africa, rather than from one isolated community that suddenly became modern. The details remain debated. Researchers disagree about how connected those populations were, how frequently genes moved between them, and which fossils belong directly within our ancestral story. The continent was enormous. Her continent was enormous. Human numbers were small. Even when climatic conditions opened a route, two populations might remain separated simply because they never happened to meet. Distance has power. You feel that as the day lengthens. The group crosses open country where the horizon seems almost unreachable. A low ridge remains visible for hours without appearing much closer. Walking makes geography honest. A few centimeters on a map can become several days beneath the sun. Then there are mountains, rivers, dry basins, dense forests. Each environment changes the cost of movement. A broad grassland may allow relatively easy travel. A large desert can divide populations almost completely during dry phases. A river may become a corridor in one season and a dangerous barrier during another. Nothing works the same everywhere. Climate keeps rearranging those obstacles. During wetter periods, northern Africa can develop networks of lakes and grasslands stretching into regions that later become severe desert. During dry phases, those same routes shrink or disappear. Populations that once exchanged people and knowledge can become isolated. Sourcing changes things quietly. Accents may drift. Tool-making traditions may change. Genetic differences gradually accumulate. Knowledge becomes increasingly local. Then perhaps thousands of years later, rainfall strengthens again. The landscape opens. Animals move through newly green territory. Humans follow them. Two populations encounter one another after an extraordinary separation. You try imagining that meeting. People approaching across grass may look broadly familiar but subtly different. Their stone tools might use recognizable techniques arranged in unfamiliar ways. Their gestures could seem understandable while their speech sounds strange. Maybe caution comes first. Maybe curiosity. Perhaps one group knows a water source the other has never seen. Perhaps someone notices an unusually good stone point. Information begins moving. People may move too. This process of populations dividing and reconnecting is sometimes described through models resembling braided streams. Branches separate flow independently and later merge again. It is a useful image because human evolution rarely resembles one straight line. Genes can travel through social encounter. Technologies can travel without genes. A useful technique may spread from group to group even when very few people relocate permanently. Culture has its own geography. One particularly intriguing clue comes from stone. Archaeologists sometimes find raw materials far from the geological places where those stones naturally occur. A piece of rock may therefore preserve evidence of mobility exchange or repeated connections across landscapes. The stone cannot tell you which process occurred. Someone might have carried it personally. It may have passed through several hands, or people may have visited the source during seasonal movements. Still, the distance is meaningful. An object has traveled. That makes a small flake surprisingly adventurous. You imagine one carefully prepared point beginning beside a distant rocky outcrop. Someone carries it for days. Later it is given to another person, perhaps as part of an ordinary exchange. That person moves elsewhere. Eventually, the stone is discarded hundreds of kilometers from its source. Hundreds of thousands of years later, archaeologists uncover it and begin wondering how it arrived. A journey survives inside geology. The humans who made that journey remain mostly invisible. By midday, your group reaches higher ground. Wind passes more strongly here, carrying the dry scent of grasses and distant smoke. From the ridge, several valleys appear at once. One leads toward greener vegetation. Another bends into rocky country. A third disappears behind hills. Every direction contains possibilities. The group chooses only one. That simple decision echoes through generations. If descendants remained in one region, they encounter different environments from relatives who moved another way. They meet different animals. They obtain different stones. They develop slightly different traditions. Separation creates variation. Reconnection mixes it. This rhythm may help explain why early Homo sapiens anatomy appears as a mosaic, rather than one perfectly uniform form. Different populations could preserve different combinations of characteristics while remaining connected often enough to belong within a larger, evolving network. Scientists sometimes call this a structured African population model. The terminology sounds modern and tidy. Life on the ground would be anything but tidy. There would be missed encounters, failed journeys, routes remembered incorrectly, relationships connecting surprisingly distant places. Perhaps two people from communities separated by several days of travel meet regularly because relatives link them. Perhaps another group remains isolated behind difficult terrain for generations. Human geography is personal. One uncertainty remains especially difficult. Scholars still debate exactly when particular Homo sapiens populations moved beyond Africa and how successful those early dispersals became. Evidence suggests that some movements into Southwest Asia occurred long before the later expansion that eventually populated much of the world. Those early excursions may not have lasted. A population can leave Africa without becoming ancestor to most people living outside Africa today. Migration does not guarantee permanence. Sometimes people expand and disappear. Sometimes they retreat. Sometimes descendants survive only as faint genetic or archaeological traces. That is another quiet correction to the familiar theory. Human expansion was not one unstoppable wave. It was experimental. Routes opened. People moved. Conditions changed. Populations contracted. Then someone tried again thousands of years later. As afternoon fades, you descend from the ridge toward another watercourse. Fresh footprints appear in soft ground. They do not belong to your group. Everyone notices. The tracks are human. They continue towards the same valley. Perhaps another community is nearby. The mood changes slightly, though nobody panics. Someone examines the prints. Another looks ahead. You feel the possibility of contact before seeing anyone. This may be how human networks expanded, not through maps, through footprints, smoke, stories, relatives, chance meetings beside water. You continue walking until the valley darkens and distant voices become faintly audible beyond the trees. The people beside you slow down. Somewhere ahead, another fire may soon be lit. For generations, these groups may have been separate. Tonight, perhaps their paths will cross. And across ancient Africa, thousands of encounters like this may be quietly weaving Homo sapiens together. Section 19. The distant voices beyond the trees belong to people you have never seen before. Your group slows as the path narrows beside the water, where damp earth gives way to flattened grass. Smoke drifts faintly through the branches, carrying the familiar smell of burning wood. Someone ahead is already watching you. For a moment, nobody moves quickly. The strangers are not larger than the people beside you, nor do they appear dramatically stronger. They carry stone tools, wooden shafts, hides, and knowledge gathered from another part of the landscape. That knowledge may be their greatest possession. By now, you have spent enough time in this world to understand something important about human survival. Strength helps. Speed helps. A strong body can carry food, climb difficult ground, throw accurately, and recover from demanding travel. But strength alone is never enough. An elephant is stronger than you. A lion is faster. A leopard can climb better, while a hyena possesses jaws no human would want to challenge. Yet early Homo sapiens persist among all of them. Their advantage lies somewhere else. You watch the two groups approach cautiously. Urson raises an empty hand. Another responds with a gesture. The tension softens slightly. Perhaps these communities have met before. Perhaps relatives connect them. Perhaps this is the first encounter within living memory. Whatever the case, nobody survives by immediately proving who can lift the heaviest rock. Communication comes first. That simple scene captures a larger pattern. Homo sapiens combines cooperation, flexible learning, technology, memory, and the ability to adapt behavior when circumstances change. None of these qualities belongs uniquely to humans in absolute terms. Many animals cooperate. Some use tools. Others remember complex landscapes or learn socially. What matters is the unusual combination and flexibility with which humans bring these abilities together. You have already watched that combination repeatedly. When water disappears, people remember another source. When one food becomes scarce, they search for alternatives. When stone breaks badly, they change the technique. When a child cannot perform a task, someone demonstrates it again. Problems rarely receive only one answer. That flexibility may become especially valuable on a planet whose climate refuses to remain stable. You leave the meeting place the following morning with several unfamiliar faces now walking among the group. Perhaps visitors are traveling with you temporarily. One carries a stone unlike the material found locally. Another seems especially skilled at recognizing tracks. The exchange is subtle. Subtle. No grand ceremony announces the transfer of knowledge. Someone simply notices how another person works. Later the technique is copied. Culture can move quietly. A useful idea does not require genetic change before it spreads. That gives humans an extraordinary advantage. Biological evolution works across generations. Cultural learning can transform behavior within a single afternoon. If one person discovers a better way to secure a point to a wooden shaft, others may imitate the improvement. If someone learns where water remains during drought, that information can be shared. Knowledge multiplies when transmitted. A stone tool cannot reproduce itself. An idea almost can. This becomes one of the strangest features of human survival. You can lose a tool and make another because the design remains inside someone's memory. The physical object is temporary. The method can continue for generations. Archaeologists see this through recurring technological traditions. Similar methods appear repeatedly across sites, suggesting that skills were learned and transmitted rather than reinvented independently every morning. The details vary across regions. That variation matters too. Different groups can solve similar problems in different ways. There is no single prehistoric instruction manual. You watch one person reshape a point after its edge breaks. Instead of discarding it, the damaged tool becomes smaller and useful again. Adaptation happens at the scale of objects. It also happens at the scale of lives. An injured person may change tasks. An older adult may travel more slowly but contribute detailed environmental knowledge. A child too small to hunt can still gather, carry, observe, and learn. The group uses different abilities. That is more efficient than demanding identical performance from everyone. I begin to see why social cooperation can outperform individual strength. One person cannot simultaneously watch children gather, plants track animals, maintain fair-shaped tools, inspect water sources, and remain alert for predators. Several people can divide those demands. Even without rigid specialization, cooperation expands what a group can accomplish. The whole becomes more capable than any individual. That sounds almost modern. It is ancient. There is also a peculiar advantage in human curiosity. Someone picks up an unusual stone simply because it looks promising. Another tests a branch for flexibility. A child plays with an object in a way adults do not normally use it. Most experiments lead nowhere. Some become useful. Innovation may begin accidentally. One quirky possibility is that play itself helps generate new techniques. A child throwing sticks for amusement may discover something about balance. Someone idly striking two materials together may notice an unexpected result. Archaeology cannot usually distinguish serious experimentation from fortunate accident. The finished tool survives. The surprised expression does not. You smile at that absence. Human progress may contain far more mistakes, jokes, and accidental discoveries than stone artifacts suggest. The archaeological record makes invention look solemn. Real invention probably was not. Still, scholars disagree about why Homo sapiens eventually became the only surviving human lineage. There is no single accepted explanation. Some researchers emphasize climate adaptability. Others point toward larger social networks, demographic advantages, technology, ecological flexibility, or combinations of these factors. Later interactions with Neanderthals and other populations make the story even more complicated. Simple spiritual stories are difficult to defend. Survival can depend on timing and circumstance. A population may possess excellent technology and still disappear after repeated environmental stress or demographic decline. Another may survive because connections between groups remain strong enough during difficult periods. Luck belongs in evolution too. You continue across a dry plain beneath afternoon heat. The air shimmers near the ground and dust settles onto your skin with every step. Someone ahead changes direction. There is no obvious reason. After several minutes, a line of birds becomes visible above distant vegetation. Water may lie there. One person noticed the clue before everyone else. That observation saves energy. Perhaps it saves much more. Human survival is filled with these small advantages: a remembered landmark, a shared warning, a repaired tool, a stranger's knowledge, a child taught correctly. None looks dramatic on its own. Together they become resilience. By sunset you reach the water. It is shallow and muddy but sufficient. People kneel near the edge while others scan the surrounding vegetation. The strangers who joined you now behave almost like part of the group. Someone shares food. Someone else demonstrates a technique with stone. Information has crossed a social boundary. You realize that humans can inherit knowledge from people who are not their parents. That expands learning enormously. And innovation does not need to remain inside one family. It can spread through friendship exchange, partnership, imitation, and travel. Networks become libraries without books. Every person carries pages. Some pages describe plants, others describe stone. Some contain roots, weather, animals' relationships, and memories of distant places. When people meet, libraries overlap. You look around at bodies resting beside the water. None appears invincible. They become tired. They become hungry. They can be injured. They fear predators and depend upon rainfall like every other creature around them. Yet they possess an unusual ability to change behavior without waiting for their bodies to evolve. That may be the deeper power you have been watching all along. Homo sapiens does not survive because Earth becomes easy. Earth never does. Humans survive because they repeatedly adjust themselves to a world that refuses to stay the same. As darkness settles, the new group and the old sit beside one fire. Different journeys have brought them here. Tonight those journeys become shared knowledge, and in that quiet exchange you begin to see the strength that matters most. Section 20. The shared fire burns low as your final morning in this ancient world begins. Dawn gathers slowly over the water, first as a pale line behind the hills. Mist rests above the shallows, and the air carries the cool smell of mud smoke, crushed grass, and damp wood. Round you people begin to stir. Someone checks the remaining embers. Another lifts a stone point and turns it toward the growing light. A child wakes against an adult's side, blinking at a world that feels ordinary to everyone here except you. These people live close to the beginning of the long story of Homo sapiens, yet nothing around them announces that fact. No monument marks their importance, and no voice tells them that distant descendants will one day occupy nearly every environment on Earth. They are simply alive today. 300,000 years ago, Earth was not waiting for civilization. It was already complete in its own way. Rivers moved across floodplains, deserts expanded and retreated, forests shifted with rainfall, and enormous animals followed seasonal resources across open country. Several human lineages occupied different regions, each adapted to worlds that could change across generations. Homo sapiens was only one of them. You have watched these early people survive without farms, permanent towns, written language, or metal. Their security came from something less visible and in many ways more powerful. They carried knowledge. A remembered spring could mean survival during drought. A skilled strike could turn ordinary stone into a cutting edge. A warning about a predator could save a child who had never seen one before. A stranger's technique could enter another community and remain there for generations. The mind became portable shelter. You follow the group away from the water one final time. Morning sunlight reaches the grass, turning droplets along the stems into brief points of light. Small birds rise ahead of your footsteps, and somewhere farther off, heavy animals move through vegetation. Nothing clears a path for humans. People still negotiate their place among larger and stronger creatures. Today, humans reshape rivers, move species between continents, illuminate cities from orbit, and alter ecosystems on a planetary scale. Here, human influence is much smaller. The landscape still sets most of the rules. Yet several qualities you recognize are already present. People cooperate. They improvise. They watch one another. They remember places that are no longer visible. They alter tools before problems arrive. They care for children long enough for complicated knowledge to pass between generations. None of those abilities needs a palace. None requires writing. Civilization will amplify them much later, but it does not invent them. You stop near a rocky rise where someone selects a piece of stone. The gesture reminds you of the toolmaker you watched earlier. The person tests the material, rejects one piece, then keeps another. Perhaps that stone will travel for days. Perhaps it will become a point break during use, be reshaped, and finally disappear beneath soil. Its entire history may leave only a fragment. Most lives vanish almost completely, and most spoken memories die with the people who carried them. Even so, enough survives to reveal that human life was already complicated. There is something quietly strange about the evidence. A tooth can preserve childhood growth. Mud can preserve a footprint. Lake sediments can preserve ancient pollen. A broken stone can preserve a sequence of decisions. Deep prehistory is reconstructed from things no one intended as messages. The ordinary becomes archival by accident. That may be the quirky gift of archaeology. A discarded flake can outlast every kingdom. You continue upward until the land opens beneath you. From the ridgewater shines between bands of vegetation. Beyond it lies dry country while clouds gather over a distant highland. More rain could expand the green corridor. A prolonged dry phase could close it. Animals may shift their ranges and people may follow. A group that seems nearby today could become separated for thousands of years. Then descendants might meet again. That repeated pattern of separation and reconnection may have helped shape our species. Researchers still disagree over exactly how early Homo sapiens populations across Africa were related, how often they exchanged genes, and which communities contributed most to later people. There may never be one simple birthplace on a map. The evidence increasingly favors complexity. Human origins may resemble a network spread across changing African landscapes, with populations dividing, adapting, reconnecting, and mixing over immense spans of time. You are looking backward across roughly 12,000 human generations, depending on how a generation is counted. Expecting every branch to remain perfectly visible would be asking geology for more than it can preserve. By around 300,000 years ago, people with key anatomical features of Homo sapiens were present in Africa. They lived among diverse animals and changing climates. They made sophisticated stone tools. They relied on social learning. They moved through landscapes that could alternate between connection and isolation. And their survival did not require knowing where history was going. You notice one person looking toward the clouds. Perhaps rain is coming. The group changes direction, slightly choosing ground that will be easier if the weather turns. Adaptation happens without ceremony. Nobody calls the decision innovative. Nobody records it. Nobody realizes that generations of choices like this may be central to the endurance of the species. Survival usually looks ordinary while it is happening. The first Homo sapiens did not conquer Earth 300,000 years ago. They endured parts of it. They learned local landscapes. They survived bad seasons. They raised children. They met strangers. Some populations disappeared. Others continued. Much later descendants of African Homo sapiens would move into Eurasia in larger and more lasting expansions, meeting Neanderthals and Denisovans and exchanging genes with them. That future remains unimaginably distant from this ridge. For now, other human lineages are still living their own stories. You descend toward the group. Warm air rises from the ground, replacing the coolness of dawn. The smell of smoke has almost disappeared, carried away by the breeze. Behind you, the old campsite already looks empty. A few darkened stones remain near the ashes. Footprints mark softer ground. Soon weather will erase most of them. The people move onward. You watch until they become smaller among the grass. There is no dramatic ending because their world does not end. Tomorrow they will search for water again. Someone will become hungry. Someone will laugh. A child will learn something. A tool will break. Clouds will gather, animals will move, and another fire may appear after sunset. The long human story continues through ordinary days. And now as you stand alone beneath the enormous African sky, you understand what Earth was really like when Homo sapiens first appeared. It was wilder, less predictable, and filled with human relatives now gone. But it was not empty. It was not primitive. And the people within it were not waiting to become human. They already were. Word count clunksio. The ridge grows quiet as the figures disappear beyond the grass. You no longer need to follow them. For a while, simply remain where you are beneath a sky that has watched every human generation come and go. The morning wind moves gently through the stems around your feet. Somewhere below, water continues along its ancient course, reflecting light for a moment before turning behind the trees. Nothing asks you to hurry. The great animals move at their own pace. Clouds drift across the highlands. The last trace of camp smoke thins into clean air until you can no longer tell where it was. 300,000 years begin to feel less like a number and more like distance fading into mist. Behind you are fires, stone flakes, muddy footprints, quiet voices, and children learning by watching older hands. Ahead lies everything else. Ice will advance and retreat many times. Deserts will become green and dry again. Other human lineages will vanish as distinct populations. Homo sapiens will travel farther, remember more, invent more, and eventually build worlds these early people could never imagine. But none of that needs to happen tonight. Tonight the story can remain here. You can picture the old river, moving beneath moonlight, insects sounding from the reeds, and a small fire glowing where darkness gathers around it. You can imagine people resting close together, breathing slowly after another long day. They do not know the future. They do not need to. For this moment they have water nearby, warmth at their hands, familiar voices in the dark, and another dawn waiting somewhere beyond the hills. Let the landscape soften now. Let the footsteps feed. Let the fire settle into embers. and let this very old Earth continue turning quietly beneath the stars.